Repeated banging on a hydraulic relief valve beneath a raised dump bed suddenly compromised support stability within the lift system. Inside an automated factory cell, a robot arm moves rapidly through its programmed arc, and the operating zone becomes active instantly. Along a roadside work area, an uncovered manhole remains exposed until a passing vehicle moves dangerously close to the unprotected access opening. An extension ladder beside a fuel service truck suddenly overloaded and collapsed, sending the structure outside its stable support position. One tossed cable near a roadside utility pole instantly created an unintended conductive path near energized equipment. A forklift carried a raised warehouse load through a narrow aisle. Then the stacked material suddenly shifted sideways outside its stable travel position. In a wet skip yard, an excavator swings beside a mobile handler, and changing ground traction rapidly destabilizes the machine. Heavy metal sheets inside a delivery truck suddenly shifted sideways during unloading, turning the cargo stack into an unstable moving load. Beside a stable grill, a grinder touched a blue steel drum, and trapped vapor pressure suddenly turned the container into a pressure hazard. At a roadside loading point, a stationary flatbed waits in place when a heavily loaded dump truck suddenly enters the active unloading space. On a multi-level construction scaffold, a routine walk across the platform suddenly encounters unstable movement as balance shifts out of alignment. Even with a spring compressor installed, the tapered C3 suspension spring kept shifting under compression, creating an uncontrolled stored force condition within the assembly. Inside an auto workshop, a raised vehicle shifts against the lift arms, and the support balance rapidly changes across the service bay. A sudden machine release turns a normal production line into a fast-moving debris path within seconds. On a muddy roadside area, an excavator raises a utility pole until the suspended load suddenly shifts outside stable alignment. Inside a machine shop, a tensioned cable is pulled, the grip slips, and stored force rapidly redirects the line of movement. Tensioned loads need controlled grip, stable footing, and a planned release before any hand pull begins. Use proper tools, set a stable position, and keep everyone out of the force line. On a poorly lit roadway, a slow-moving tractor crosses the lane when a fast-approaching lorry suddenly enters the same travel path with very limited visibility ahead. Slow-moving equipment on active roads must be protected with clear warning lights, reflective markings, and proper traffic control so approaching drivers can recognize the hazard early and adjust safely. A heavy industrial lift suddenly lost stability during repositioning, redirecting the suspended load into the active work area. Suspended loads must be lifted with balanced rigging, controlled swing management, and fully established exclusion areas. Taglines, pre-lift communication, and coordinated crane movement are critical to maintaining load control throughout the operation. A large industrial mixing tank was running during cleaning operations. Then the rotating system suddenly created an uncontrolled internal movement hazard. Never trust a machine's silence. Before reaching inside rotating equipment, verify complete lockout, zero energy isolation, and personal escape space first. Stacked foam on a loaded truck ignites rapidly, and flame spread moves upward across the cargo wall within seconds. Burning cargo must be treated as an emergency scene, not a close-range control task. Clear the area, call emergency response, keep nearby fuel away, and use proper firefighting equipment only from a protected position. Inside a residential yard, a standing tree is being cut from an elevated position when the upper section suddenly breaks free and swings back across the designated cutting zone. Plan every cut carefully and anticipate the movement of the falling section. Always stay clear of the potential swing path during tree removal operations. On a drilling rig floor, unsecured handling equipment suddenly shifts loose during machine startup and begins swinging across the surrounding area. Never start rig machinery or handling systems before verifying that all attached equipment, restraints, and connection points are fully secured and load ready. A busy commercial kitchen suddenly experienced a fryer ignition event while multiple operations were active around the cooking line. Commercial fryers must be monitored for oil temperature control, grease buildup, and safe clearance around open heat sources. Staff coordination, accessible suppression systems, and immediate heat isolation are critical during any flare-up event. Welding sparks touched a large steel tank during fabrication work. Then trapped pressure suddenly surged through the vessel. A sealed tank can kill before flames appear. Confirm venting, gas testing, isolation, and hot work authorization before trusting any empty vessel. On a timber loading deck, logs are being stacked together. When the rope suddenly loosens and rounded surface suddenly shifts and begins rolling through the active loading zone, working on loose, round materials like logs creates a constant movement hazard because cylindrical loads can shift without warning under pressure or vibration. Along a narrow residential street, a concrete mixer keeps turning until the rotating drum suddenly redirects movement along the space beside it. Keep loose clothing, tools, and body position clear of exposed rotating equipment whenever machinery is operating or still in motion. A reversing delivery truck closed the gap between two parked vehicles in seconds, turning the narrow unloading space into a restricted clearance hazard path. Reversing vehicles require controlled backing procedures, spotter awareness, and fully clear movement paths before any unloading or rear door activity begins. Tight vehicle spacing must always include safe escape clearance. A heavy battery container was being moved across the shop floor. Then the rolling load suddenly shifted and dropped into the equipment path. Rolling battery containers create immediate pinch point and ground level crushing hazards, create distance before moving the load, stabilize the travel path, and protect every pinch zone below. Inside a cramped kitchen, a sauce-filled pot moves across wet tile, and surface grip rapidly disappears beneath the load. Keep kitchen floors dry and marked before moving heavy containers through the work area. Clean spills right away, mark wet areas clearly, and keep heavy containers off contaminated walking paths. A tractor remains trapped in soft ground while a long wooden plank is pressed against the rotating wheel. Then the built-up force suddenly releases, sending the board rapidly outward across the work area. Makeshift leverage tools under heavy load can store hidden energy and release it without warning, causing unsecured objects to move violently through the work area. Inside a deep industrial shaft, the narrow platform edge suddenly opens into an unguarded vertical space below. Install secured fall protection, stable work platforms, and guarded edges before working near open shafts or elevated opening. A rooftop entry point suddenly loaded the fall arrest system when movement near the edge transferred force into the lifeline above the warehouse opening. Fall protection systems must include properly rated anchor points, controlled access positioning, and adequate clearance beneath the working area. Harnesses, lifelines, and rescue planning are critical whenever working near roof opening. A flatbed trailer turned through a narrow compound gate. Then the swinging rear section suddenly swept across the side clearance area. The hazard area forms before contact. If a truck is turning, never trust your standing space between moving steel and fixed walls. A metal frame stretched across a narrow water feature walkway. Then hidden electrical energy suddenly traveled through the entire structure. If metal can carry current, your body can too. Treat exposed framing as energized until isolation, insulation, and dry conditions prove otherwise. Inside an auto workshop, a torch heats a fuel tank shell, and residual vapor rapidly creates an active combustion risk. Fuel tanks must be drained, cleaned, purged, and gas tested before any welding, soldering, or heat work begins. Use approved hot work controls, confirm no flammable vapor is present, and keep ignition sources away from fuel contaminated. Inside a metal recycling facility, scrap material is introduced into a hot furnace. When hidden moisture instantly flashes into steam, releasing a rapid surge of pressure through the molten metal. Molten metal processes require strict moisture prevention, controlled charging methods, and safe separation between personnel and furnace operating areas to reduce sudden pressure hazards. At a busy shipping dock, a suspended haul truck suddenly shifts out of stable alignment as the lifting lines redistribute unevenly above the deck. Keep all personnel and equipment clear of suspended load paths during lifting operations, especially when moving heavy vehicles or unbalanced machinery. A waste oil drain cart is being accessed in the auto shop floor. Then pressurized fluid suddenly discharged throughout the surrounding area. Pressure hides until it escapes. Before opening oil systems, confirm zero stored force, secure every fitting, and control where failure travels. Inside a fenced machine area, automated equipment continues cycling inside the guarded cell, and active motion extends through the access zone. A guarded machine cell is only safe to enter after lockout and verified zero motion. Stop the system, lock out the energy, verify zero motion, and enter only through controlled access point. During concrete placement near overhead power lines, a long stick is lifted too high beneath energized lines, allowing electrical energy to suddenly bridge the air gap. Always maintain safe approach distances from overhead power lines and keep tools, materials, and equipment well below restricted clearance limits to reduce exposure to energized electrical field. Inside a narrow factory lane, a forklift rolls forward behind a towering load until the hidden travel path closes beside the machine. Separate pedestrian walkways from forklift travel lanes and maintain clear visibility before moving loads through active work areas. On a moving flatbed trailer, a massive steel coil shifts outside its restraints and rapidly rolls along the trailer deck toward the cab area. Secure steel coils with proper chocks, cradle supports, and rated tie-down systems before transport to prevent rolling movement during braking, turning, or load shift. An underinflated heavy vehicle tire suddenly released stored pressure during inflation, creating a high-energy pressure release area within the service zone. Truck and heavy equipment tires must be fully inspected for structural damage, sidewall weakness, bead separation, and pressure loss before reinflation. Remote air lines, restraint devices, and safe standoff positioning are critical during inflation procedures. Inside a clean factory mixing room, one open container and one transfer hose turn static electricity into ignition. Ignition often starts invisibly. Before transferring flammables, control static paths, bond the system, and assume a flammable vapor atmosphere may already be present. Behind a busy bar, an open floor hatch interrupts the service path, and the walkway suddenly transitions into an unprotected access opening. Floor openings in active work areas must be covered, guarded, or clearly controlled before the route is used. Use barriers, warning signs, secure covers, and clear communication before opening any hatch or service access point. On an elevated platform, a crane raises a bundle of concrete blocks into the air. Then the suspended load begins drifting toward the overhead restricted clearance area. Always keep workers clear of suspended loads in energized areas during lifting operations. Plan lift routes carefully, maintain safe clearance from overhead lines, and ensure personnel stay on secure platforms away from moving loads and electrical exposure. Inside a busy supermarket, towering shelves stand fully loaded. Then a rack suddenly fails, triggering a chain reaction of shifting shelves across the aisle. Storage racks must be loaded evenly, inspected regularly, and kept within their rated capacity. Heavy products should remain on lower levels, while all shelving systems must stay properly secured and aligned to reduce structural stress and prevent chain reaction failures. Inside a crowded scrap yard, heat and smoke suddenly emerge from an equipment as fire spreads along the sidewall. Remove damaged, overheated, or unstable heavy equipment tires from service immediately. Inspect tires regularly for sidewall damage, heat buildup, low pressure, and structural wear. While unloading from the trailer, the excavator was slewed 90 degrees with the counterweight shifted over the side, moving the machine outside its optimal stability range. Excavators must remain aligned with the trailer center line during offloading unless ground support, track position, and load balance are verified. Spotters and controlled slew movement are critical whenever counterweight position changes during unloading. Inside a busy workshop, one suspended load began swinging with no guide rope controlling its path. Loads rarely travel where you expect. Control suspended movement with taglines, clear escape space, and one person directing every motion. At a fuel station, ignition rapidly spreads through the pump area. and pressure force moves across the forecourt. Fuel vapor hazard areas require immediate distance, controlled shutdown, and emergency scene management. Move back, clear the area, shut down fueling systems only if it is safe, and let emergency responders control the scene. Inside a home garage, oil spreads across the floor, and traction rapidly decreases along the walkway. Oil leaks should be blocked, absorbed, and cleaned before the garage path is used. Mark the area, absorb the spill, clean the surface, and check the vehicle leak source before reopening the walkway. At a busy loading dock, a forklift transitions out of a trailer just as the trailer unexpectedly shifts away from the dock position. Immobilize every trailer with wheel chocks, brake locks, and dock restraints before forklift loading or unloading begins, and verify clear communication between the driver and loading crew. Inside a noisy metal processing plant, a forklift moves deeper into a restricted visibility zone as surrounding movement disappears in front of the machine. Control and isolate blind zones before reversing heavy industrial vehicles, especially in active processing plant. A small ignition point inside a power loom machine reached accumulated textile material and combustible deposits within the production line. Power loom operations require continuous housekeeping, controlled lubrication management, and routine inspection of electrical systems, friction points, and lint accumulation. Emergency shutdown access and fire response equipment must remain accessible throughout the area. Inside a warehouse aisle, one unsecured ladder turned a quick reach into an uncontrolled height exposure. Shortcuts create instability fastest. Secure footing, correct ladder angle, and proper access equipment matter because pallet racking was never built to support ladder loads. Once contact shifts at either end, the ladder stops being accessed and becomes an uncontrolled movement hazard. Outside an industrial building, raised booms move side by side, and shifting balance rapidly changes movement across the lift zone. Aerial lifts and crane booms need a clearly marked exclusion zone before any movement begins. Keep the area clear, control the swing radius, confirm stable ground, and coordinate each movement with a spot. Inside a compact workshop, metal rotates at high speed inside an active machine, while handling activity continues before the system fully stops. Rotating machinery creates constant pulling force, where even brief contact can become an immediate entanglement point. Cleaning, adjusting, or handling material during active motion allows friction to pull objects directly into the rotating path before anyone can react. Always shut the machine down fully, allow all movement to stop, and isolate stored energy before entering the work area. On a rough hillside worksite, a running chainsaw suddenly redirects upward during the cut as unstable footing shifts the cutting angle out of alignment. Maintain stable footing, controlled cutting position, and a firm two-handed grip whenever operating a chainsaw, especially on uneven ground where balance and cutting angle can shift quickly during use. Using a loose tailgate as a step-off point from a moving truck bed suddenly removed stable support at the rear access point. Tailgates must be fully secured and verified for load support before being used as access or exit points. Vehicle access should only occur when the truck is stationary and stable footing is available. Inside a service bay, one equipment adjustment release stored energy without warning. Stored force punishes assumptions. Before adjusting tensioned equipment, isolates energy, secures the component, and identifies the path it may take if restraint fails. Springs, pressure, and tension release faster than human reaction, and the danger path often stays hidden until movement begins. Inside a tire workshop, an inflated wheel assembly suddenly releases stored pressure, and force rapidly spreads across the service bay. Inflated heavy tire assemblies need a safety cage or restraint before any service work continues. Deflate before handling, inspect the rim, use proper inflation equipment, and keep all pressure release paths clear. A fully loaded plant cart rolled onto an escalator entrance, and gravity-driven movement quickly exceeded normal wheel control. Escalators are designed for passenger movement, not heavy carts rolling racks or oversized loads. Large transport carts should only use elevators or designated freight moving equipment with controlled wheel restraint. On a moving tank trailer, a manual cable lifting shortcut created instant overhead line exposure. Improvisation creates serious overhead line hazards. Never lift and hope beneath overhead utilities. Treat cables as fixed energized boundaries requiring route planning, utility coordination, spotters, verified clearance, and full authority to stop movement before contact happens. At a fireworks workshop, pyrotechnic powder is moved by cart, and a static discharge rapidly activates the surrounding combustion hazard. Pyrotechnic powder must be handled with static control protection and strict separation from ignition sources. Use approved containers, bonding, grounding, anti-static tools, and clear separation from heat and sparks. Inside a workshop, machinery runs at steady speed. Then a loose piece of fabric brushes the rotating parts and is rapidly redirected through the moving system. Loose clothing, fabric, and unsecured materials must be kept away from moving machinery at all times. Once caught by a rotating system, the motion can pull material into the equipment within seconds. Inside a tire repair yard, an overpressurized tire suddenly fails and forcefully redirects the wheel assembly upward during inflation. Use remote inflation devices, restraining cages, and controlled pressure procedures whenever inflating heavy vehicle tires. Keep all personnel clear of the sidewall and trajectory path during inflation. A rotating drilling system kept cycling, while exposed moving components remained accessible inside the work area during operation. Rotating drilling and hydraulic equipment must be fully isolated before clearing jams, guiding components, or reaching near moving assemblies. Hands, gloves, and loose clothing should remain outside active pinch points and rotating paths at all times. Inside a vehicle workshop, hot work on a fuel tank turned trapped vapor into sudden pressure release. Empty is one of the most dangerous assumptions in hot work. Drain, clean, ventilate, test, and certify fuel tanks before applying heat. Residual vapor inside confined steel can ignite long before visible warning appears. Inside a factory bay, a robotic arm moves out from behind a tall machine, and the active movement zone rapidly narrows. Robotic arm travel paths must be fully isolated before the work zone is entered. Lock out the system, verify zero motion, and keep clear of all clamp, sweep, and pinch zone. A quiet kitchen suddenly fills with a rapid flash of flame. Moments after a stove is lit, the air has already filled with unseen fuel vapors. In enclosed cooking spaces, leaking gas can collect silently and turn the entire room into an ignition hazard. Always allow fresh airflow, confirm burners are properly shut off, and never introduce a flame if gas buildup is suspected, since even a tiny spark can trigger an instant flash event. On a forest hillside, tree movement begins during the cut as the ladder suddenly shifts out of stable positioning beside the trunk. Stay clear of the tree's movement path during cutting operations. Use controlled cutting plans, stable access equipment, and proper positioning to prevent ladders from being struck, displaced, or pulled during tree work. A forklift carrying its mast fully elevated entered. A turn, and the machine suddenly moved outside its optimal stability range. Forklifts and container handlers must travel with loads and masts kept low, centered, and within the machine's stability limits. Speed control, turning radius, and load height must always match the operating surface and equipment capacity. Inside a supermarket aisle, lower shelf restocking placed the gondola in an unstable loading condition. Collapse often starts at the bottom. Before touching shelf stock, confirm anchoring, level, and bracing, because lower changes can silently destabilize the entire rack above you. Inside a warehouse aisle, a forklift contacts the storage rack, and stacked inventory rapidly shifts through the shelving rows. Pallet racking needs controlled speed, clear spacing, and full load awareness during forklift travel. Use marked travel lanes, protect rack legs, slow down near turns, and inspect any rack impact right away. At a loading bay, a box truck sits open during cargo handling. Then the unsecured vehicle suddenly begins rolling forward on its own, while unloading operations remain active at the rear. Vehicles must always be fully secured before loading or unloading operations begin. Apply parking brakes, use wheel chocks, and confirm the truck cannot move before anyone enters the cargo area or positions equipment at the rear. On a roadside utility site, a fallen metal structure hangs across overhead power lines as unstable movement develops around the energized contact area. Treat every object touching overhead electrical lines as fully energized and establish a wide exclusion zone until utility crews confirm the area is isolated and safe. A cutting operation beside stacked flammable materials sent sparks across the work lane, and an ignition source reached the combustible storage area. Hot work such as grinding or cutting must be separated from combustible storage areas with proper shielding and fire watch procedures. Work zones should be cleared of flammable and exposed materials before ignition sources are introduced. Inside a kitchen, one unstable pot transfer sent boiling oil into an uncontrolled spill path. Hot oil hazards begin before the spill. Secure your grip, clear your route, and treat boiling oil like stored force that punishes sudden movement instantly. On a staircase, a large glass panel is carried upward. Then the load shifts, and the narrow route rapidly becomes unstable for the movement team. Large glass panels need controlled handling before they move through stairs, tight turns, or narrow routes. Use suction lifters, edge protection, gloves, a clear path, and one coordinated lead for every movement. A small pipe leak inside the room seems under control for a moment, until the trapped pressure behind the line suddenly releases, sending water rapidly across the room. Pressure systems must be isolated and depressurized before any containment attempt. Quick patch methods may appear stable briefly, but flowing pressure will eventually overpower weak materials and release force without warning. Inside a crowded metal stamping workshop, an active power press cycles downward as movement enters the open press area. Keep all hands and tools outside the press zone until guarding systems, lockout procedures, and controlled activation safeguards are fully in place and verified before operation. A raised truck bed was being accessed underneath when hydraulic support was suddenly lost, and the dump body moved toward the chassis. Raised dump beds must always be secured with mechanical body props or locking supports before anyone enters beneath the structure. Hydraulic systems should never be relied on during inspection or repair work. A communications tower access point remained exposed to wind loading, and the mast began flexing dramatically during elevated work. Tower climbing operations require continuous fall arrest attachment, verified anchor systems, and strict structural stability checks before ascending. Wind conditions, tower movement, and climbing loads must be monitored throughout the task. Inside a loading bay, a ladder leaned against a pole when a slight shift in position suddenly turned a routine task into a loss of stability hazard. Verify that ladders are secured and positioned on stable support points before climbing. Even when a ladder is leaning against a rigid structure, movement, shifting contact, or changing angles can reduce stability and lead to an unexpected ladder displacement. Inside a renovation room, a pipe connection is opened before the line is fully depressurized, and stored liquid rapidly releases into the repair area. Pipelines should be isolated, depressurized, and drained before any connection is opened. Shut off the supply, release pressure, set containment, and confirm the line is empty before repairs begin. During maintenance outside a restaurant, elevated access equipment suddenly slides out of position, creating a rapidly shifting support hazard within seconds. Climbing equipment depends entirely on balance, grip, and surface stability. Poor positioning, weak footing, or damaged support points can quickly break that balance, causing the entire setup to shift unexpectedly. At a work zone, the rear of a truck is being opened when unstable cargo suddenly shifts outward from the loaded trailer. Check cargo stability and secure shifting loads before opening truck doors, releasing restraints, or entering unloading areas after transport. Two forklifts entered the same travel lane while one carried a pallet stack so high it completely blocked the machine's forward view. Forklift loads must be carried at safe heights that preserve visibility across the travel path. When loads obstruct sightlines, spotter guidance and controlled traffic coordination should be used before entering shared equipment lanes. At a loading yard, unsecured container doors turn shifted cargo into an uncontrolled rear release. An open container door is more than an opening. It is a failed barrier. Secure rear doors completely before movement, because shifting cargo always searches for the easiest escape path. On a demolition deck, concrete is broken from the top, and structural support rapidly changes beneath the active work area. Demolition must be sequenced so no activity takes place on any section being broken or losing support. Use engineered sequencing, remote braking methods, fall protection, and clear exclusion zones before concrete is removed. On an elevated concrete deck, freshly poured concrete spreads across a suspended rebar platform. Then the overloaded section suddenly loses support, allowing the surface to shift downward under the changing load. Temporary formwork and suspended support systems must never be loaded beyond their design capacity during concrete placement. Reinforcement decks, shoring, and support structures require continuous inspection, balanced loading, and controlled pour sequencing to maintain structural stability. A mobile crane pitches forward during the lift. Then the entire machine suddenly shifts onto its back support position. Verify load weight, boom radius, counterweight configuration, and outrigger support before every lift to keep the crane's center of gravity inside its stable operating range. Cranes rely on counterweights and outriggers to keep the center of gravity inside a stable footprint. When lifting force or load position pushes that balance beyond the stable operating range, the crane rotates around its support edge and rapidly loses stable positioning. Crane stability can disappear the moment lifting balance is lost. Every lift depends on controlled load limits, solid ground support, and proper machine setup. A heavily damaged tire had been kept in service and reinflated beside the workshop entrance when the assembly suddenly released stored pressure. Heavily worn, damaged, or structurally compromised tires should be removed from service rather than repaired and reinflated. Tire inflation must use restraint devices, remote air lines, and safe standoff distance during pressure buildup. Inside a commercial kitchen, improvised climbing near energized equipment created instant electrical exposure. Do not climb on kitchen equipment or reach near electrical components without isolation, lockout, and proper access equipment. Stainless appliances, wet floors, metal surfaces, and exposed electrical points create a high-risk path for current. A shortcut access method can turn routine maintenance into uncontrolled electrical contact. Electricity follows the easiest conductive path, especially through metal equipment and damp surfaces. Without isolation, conductive surfaces and nearby contact points can become part of the circuit path. Control the power before access begins. Isolate, lock out, test, and use proper platforms for elevated kitchen work. Inside a workshop, a board moves across a spinning table saw blade, and the cutting area rapidly redirects force along the feed path. Table saw cuts need guarded blade control, stable feed pressure, and hands kept away from the cut line. Use push sticks, proper guards, a riving knife, steady feed pressure, and keep clear of the blade path. On a terrace, trash is thrown near an overhead power line, and the return motion rapidly redirects movement into the electrical clearance area. Overhead power lines require full clearance before any throwing, swinging, reaching, or disposal work begins. Keep all movement away from wires, reroute the task, and treat every nearby line as energized. Return motion can redirect nearby conductive objects into the work path. Once contact or close proximity occurs, electrical energy can transfer through connected surfaces and surrounding materials. Clear the airspace before any movement. No distance, no throw. A pickup remains parked along the roadside after dark, its rear facing active traffic, while approaching vehicles continue moving through the narrow travel lane beside it. Any activity near moving traffic requires protected spacing and clear separation from the travel path. Never treat the edge of an active roadway as a safe resting or standing area. Along a narrow roadside delivery lane, stacked material sits overloaded on a truck bed. Then, the unsecured weight suddenly shifts outward beyond the side of the vehicle. Transport loads must remain within rated weight limits and be fully restrained before movement or unloading begins. Overstacked or unstable cargo can rapidly shift beyond containment once balance changes during transport or handling. Heavy stacked materials store momentum while elevated above the truck's support base. When the load becomes uneven or exceeds secure restraint capacity, gravity pulls the weight outward once movement or vibration shifts the center of mass beyond the edge of support. The falling mass then accelerates rapidly under its own weight. Unsecured weight always follows gravity. Control the load before the load controls the outcome. A transfer pipe connected to a gas tanker suddenly releases heat, smoke, and pressure during gas handling operations. Verify pressure release controls, grounding systems, and ignition protection before connecting, opening, or operating any fuel transfer equipment during loading or unloading work. A wire stretched across the construction equipment until electrical activity suddenly spread through the machine structure. Keep all equipment and personnel clear of overhead wires until the power source has been isolated, confirmed, de-energized, and released safe for contact by the utility authority. Metal equipment can conduct electricity the moment it contacts energized overhead lines. Electrical current can instantly travel through the machine structure, surrounding ground, and nearby contact points. Overhead power lines can transfer electrical energy into nearby equipment without obvious warning signs. Maintain safe clearance distances and involve utility crews before attempting any wire removal or recovery work. An empty fuel tank was cut open during hot work, but vapor trapped inside the vessel still provided an ignition source within the enclosed space. Fuel tanks must be fully drained, cleaned, gas tested, and ventilated before any cutting or welding begins. Residual vapors inside empty containers can remain highly combustible long after liquid fuel is removed. Flammable vapor-air mixtures inside enclosed tanks can ignite when exposed to sparks. Because vapors expand throughout the container volume, ignition pressure can rapidly build and release outward from the vessel. An empty tank is not the same as a gas-free tank. Atmospheric testing and vapor removal are essential before performing hot work on fuel containers. Inside a materials yard, the equipment supporting a suspended bundle suddenly failed, sending the load into an uncontrolled collapse path. Establish exclusion areas around suspended loads and verify the condition and capacity of all lifting equipment before every lift. Equipment failure can instantly remove load support, turning a suspended bundle into an uncontrolled falling load hazard with little or no warning. On a residential walkway, a hedge trimmer was touched up from the exposed cutting end. Treat hedge trimmer blades as active hazards, even when the tool appears powered off. Cutting tools must be treated as active hazards until power is isolated and the blade is covered. A quick grab near the teeth can place contact directly on the sharp edge path. Hedge trimmer blades have alternating teeth designed to shear material with very small clearance. Even without motion, the exposed edge can create immediate contact exposure. Control the blade before moving the tool. Power off, unplug or remove the battery, use the handle, and install the blade guard. Inside a construction workspace, a full-size glass sheet loses balance during a solo move, and the panel rapidly breaks apart across the floor area. Never, ever handle large glass panels alone or by force. Use suction lifters, A-frame carts, team handling, gloves, edge protection, and a clear movement plan before shifting the panel. At a wet roadside, a tractor trailer turns beside the walking path, and the blind corner rapidly narrows the available clearance during the sweep. Heavy trucks should only turn when the full walking path is clear and visible. Use mirrors, cameras, spotters, low speed, and extra clearance before moving near sidewalks, crossings, or tight entrances. Long trucks off track during turns, causing the trailer to follow a tighter path than the cab. Wet roads and limited visibility reduce the available adjustment space during the maneuver. Clear the walking path before the truck moves. No full view, no turn. Across a dusty industrial workyard, maintenance activity continues around an exposed electrical cabinet. Then a sudden electrical flash releases from inside the energized equipment. Electrical systems must always be isolated and secured before access begins. Open energized equipment creates an invisible hazard area where uncontrolled energy can release instantly if proper lockout and clearance controls are missing. On a crowded construction site, work continues beside an excavator when the bucket suddenly drops into the active movement path during operation. Do not work beneath or beside an active excavator attachment without a fully controlled exclusion area, constant operator visibility, and clear separation between ground crews and moving equipment. Excavator buckets carry massive hydraulic force and continue moving through wide swing arcs with limited stopping distance when elevated work positions enter the attachment's rotation path. Even small machine movements can rapidly reduce safe clearance around the active equipment. Heavy equipment needs a protected movement perimeter at all times, separate people from swing paths before any bucket movement begins. The rotating drilling equipment remains still for a moment, then suddenly returns to active motion across the operating area. Fully isolate, lock out, and verify all rotating equipment has stopped before placing hands, tools, or materials near moving drilling machinery or exposed drive components. A truck tire holds pressure during inflation, then the compressed wheel assembly suddenly separates and redirects force across the service area. Use inflation cages, remote airlines, and controlled pressure procedures to reduce exposure to sudden pressure release and moving wheel components during tire servicing. Heavy vehicle tires store large amounts of compressed air energy inside the casing and wheel assembly. If a rim component, bead, or tire structure fails, the rapid pressure release can generate powerful air movement and project wheel components outward. Compressed air failures can release powerful force within fractions of a second. Use proper inflation controls and maintain safe clearance around the wheel assembly during tire servicing. An overhead crane attempted to move a massive steel load across the fabrication floor when the lift setup exceeded its verified lifting capacity. Crane operations must stay within verified load limits for the crane, lifting magnets, and support equipment before movement. Load weight, center of gravity, and rigging capacity should be confirmed during pre-lift checks. At a metal stamping press, one hand kept clearing finished parts while the other kept feeding new material into it until the available clearance disappeared during the next cycle. Power presses must use guarding, two-hand controls, or automatic feeding methods that keep hands completely outside the die space during every cycle. Stamping presses cycle with extreme force and minimal stopping distance once activated. Repetitive hand-feeding motions can reduce awareness of die clearance timing, especially during continuous production cycles. Fast production rhythms can erase safe spacing around moving dies. Keep all hand movements outside the press path before every stroke begins. At a street excavation, an uncontrolled car entered the active work area. Protect roadway work with barriers, traffic separation, spotters, and clear vehicle control planning before excavation begins. Cones alone do not stop vehicle intrusion. Any excavation beside live traffic needs physical protection, safe routing, warning signs, and a controlled buffer between traffic and the work path. Inside a vehicle workshop, underbody hot work sent flame and smoke into the repair area. Treat underbody hot work as a fire risk operation unless fuel systems, coatings, hoses, wiring, and enclosed cavities are fully isolated. A vehicle underside can hide fuel residue, vapor pockets, oil film, rubber, plastic, insulation, and combustible coatings. Welding or cutting in that space must be treated as a fire risk operation, not a quick repair. Welding heat and sparks can ignite vapors, undercoating, grease, or nearby combustible materials. Once ignition starts under a vehicle, the enclosed geometry can channel flame and smoke rapidly. Control the fuel, vapor, and combustibles. Isolate, clean, shield, ventilate, and keep Firewatch ready. During fire extinguisher practice, a pan fire is approached too closely, and flame movement rapidly spreads across the training area. Live fire training requires safe distance, wind awareness, and a clear exit path before the extinguisher is used. Stand back, approach from upwind, aim at the base, sweep steadily, and keep a clear retreat path. Inside a crowded garage in Vanuatu, the earthquake hits without warning. Shelves shake, tools shift across the floor, and the workspace rapidly loses stability. Do move away from shelves, vehicles, glass, and unsecured equipment during strong shaking. Drop low, protect your head, and move only when the shaking stops. Earthquake motion turns loose tools, stacked parts, and vehicles into moving hazards. Unsecured storage can fall, slide, or swing across the workspace. Secure the room before the ground moves. During shaking, protect first, move second. A leaning tree twists above the roofline during the cut, then the trunk suddenly shifts and redirects movement across the structure below. Plan and control the full fall direction before cutting any leaning tree near structures, rooftops, or active work areas. Keep all personnel completely outside the expected movement area and rebound zone during the operation. Deep inside a narrow construction excavation, work continues around an exposed underground utility. Then a hidden pressure pocket suddenly releases from below, forcing pressurized gas upward through the trench. Underground utility systems must always be treated as active energy sources during excavation work. Maintain continuous gas monitoring, control ignition hazards, and avoid standing directly over exposed fittings, joints, or damaged sections where pressure could release unexpectedly. Buried pressurized lines store compressed energy beneath the surface. When weakened connections or damaged sections fail, the gas escapes rapidly through the nearest opening, creating a concentrated upward release. In confined trenches, the surrounding walls restrict airflow and intensify the force and movement of expanding gases. Pressure hidden underground can release without warning. Stay clear, monitor constantly, and never assume the line is inactive. At the rear of the rotating lathe line, falling rubber stock contacts the spinning mandrel and rapidly redirects movement along the turning path. Stop and isolate rotating lathes before reaching toward falling material, loose stock, or jammed product near the mandrel area. Keep hands, clothing, and tools clear of rotating shafts and wrap point. Inside the deep trench beside the excavator bucket, the soil wall suddenly shifts and large amounts of earth move into the excavation area. Protect all trench work areas with trench boxes, shoring systems, or properly sloped walls before allowing entry into deep excavations. Keep excavators, spoil piles, and heavy loads set back from trench edges. Excavation walls hold massive lateral soil pressure that can become unstable when affected by moisture, vibration, or uneven soil layering. Heavy equipment near the edge adds additional ground stress that can rapidly reduce wall stability. Trench walls can become unstable with very little visible warning beforehand. Use trench protection systems and keep work areas clear of unsupported excavation walls at all times. A tractor kept pulling a concrete mixer across uneven ground while the drum trailer leaned harder with every bump. Then the towing setup moved outside its stable support range. Trailer-mounted mixers must stay within towing limits, use stable travel paths, and maintain balanced wheel support before moving across rough or sloped terrain. A commercial kitchen ignition event was already developing across the cook line when improvised materials were introduced while the stove and gas system remained energized. Commercial kitchen fires must be handled with proper extinguisher methods, fuel isolation, and emergency shutdown procedures instead of improvised materials near active flames. Cooking oils and gas-fed flames can spread rapidly once heat transfers across metal surfaces and surrounding vapors. Fabric materials can also ignite or transfer heat when used close to an active flame source. Fast reactions cannot control a kitchen fire without the right shutdown method. Use proper fire equipment, isolate the fuel source, and keep improvised materials away from open flames. Inside a raised steel frame, one unsecured member turned into a false walking surface. Assume unfinished framing can fail under you until every member is seated, fixed, verified, and protected with proper decking or fall protection. A frame that is not locked into position can look stable but lose support unexpectedly under load. Temporary steel must never be treated as a finished platform. Inside a warehouse staging area, unevenly stacked pallets shifted into an uncontrolled collapse path. Limit pallet height and verify alignment, spacing, and load stability before leaving any stacked materials unattended. A pallet stack can look balanced while its weight is already leaning outside the base. Forklift placement, uneven boards, side impact, or vibration can start a fast chain reaction. Tall pallet stacks have a high center of gravity and very little tolerance for side movement. Once the lean passes the support footprint, gravity pulls the stack outward. Control the stack before leaving it. Align, limit height, secure, and keep active paths clear. Inside a warehouse aisle, a forklift moves between loaded racks. Then an impact rapidly shifts stacked pallets across the aisle space. Forklift travel near pallet racking requires controlled clearance, low speed, and full aisle awareness. Keep forks low, stay centered in the aisle, protect rack uprights, and report any rack strike right. At a loading dock, a tall pallet starts tipping. Then the trailer edge rapidly turns the unload into an unstable load control situation. Unstable pallets at dock edges require slow control, clear footing space, and proper unloading equipment before the load moves. Use proper unloading equipment, keep feet clear of the pallet path, control the pallet jack slowly, and stop immediately if the load begins to lean. A tall pallet shifts its center of gravity fast when it tilts. Once the load passes its base support, manual force cannot hold it back. Control the pallet before it reaches the edge. Feet clear, load steady, movement slow. High above the ground on a rooftop steel frame, alignment work continues around a suspended truss. Then the massive structure suddenly loses balance and redirects through the active lift area. Unsecured structural components can shift without warning during lifting or positioning work. Always maintain safe separation from suspended or partially supported materials, and never remain inside the possible travel or swing path of moving steel. At the rear of a delivery truck, the cargo doors swing open during unloading. Then the tightly packed load suddenly shifts outward from inside the trailer. Cargo inside enclosed trailers must be properly restrained and load balanced before transport. Rear doors should always be opened cautiously from protected positions, with awareness that shifting loads can move suddenly once containment is released. During transport, stacked cargo can shift as vibration, braking, and movement gradually redistribute weight inside the trailer. Once the rear doors are opened, the barrier holding that unstable load in place disappears, allowing gravity and stored pressure from the shifted cargo to drive the material outward rapidly. A closed trailer can hide unstable force behind the doors. Secure the load before releasing the containment. A garbage truck lifts to pour refuse into the dumping platform. Then the entire vehicle suddenly shifts forward toward the unloading pit. Verify load balance, dumping angle, and platform positioning before raising heavy truck bodies near waste pits, transfer stations, or elevated unloading areas. Use controlled dumping procedures, stable approach alignment, and clear edge boundaries. Inside an auto workshop, a wheel rolls away from the lifted car as unexpected movement is noticed inside the rim cavity. Inspect tires, rims, wheel wells, and stored vehicle components carefully before lifting, rolling, or carrying them through the workshop, especially in areas where hidden hazards may shelter inside enclosed spaces. Dark enclosed spaces inside wheels, rims, and suspension areas can attract animals or collect hidden obstructions around parked vehicles. Unexpected movement during handling can quickly interrupt balance and create unstable motion near lifting equipment or rolling components. Routine maintenance areas can hide unexpected hazards inside enclosed vehicle components. Inspect wheels and surrounding work areas carefully before lifting, rolling, or servicing any part of the vehicle. A heavily loaded toolbox had its drawers pulled open, then the cabinet's center of gravity shifted beyond its stable base. Rolling tool cabinets must be anchored or stabilized when carrying heavy drawer loads, especially before opening upper or fully packed drawers. A steel plate was lifted from a flatbed using worn lifting gear. Then a sling connection lost load support and redirected the suspended load onto the trailer deck. Lifting slings, hooks, and rigging points must be inspected for wear, deformation, and load rating before every heavy lift or repositioning task. Heavy steel plates generate massive tension forces across sling angles and connection points during lifting. Damaged or overloaded rigging can fail suddenly once the load shifts or dynamic force exceeds the gear's working limit. One weak rigging point can release the full force of a suspended load. Inspect lifting gear carefully and remove worn components before every lift. On a suspended platform, hot work and unstable positioning created uncontrolled fall exposure. Only weld from suspended platforms that are rated, secured, level, guarded, and backed by proper fall protection. A suspended work surface can shift with body movement, tool movement, cable drag, or welding position changes. Hot work adds distraction, heat, sparks, and limited reaction time. A forklift climbed into the flatbed ramp, then the entire load balance shifted backward in seconds. Confirm ramp angle, equipment weight, load balance, and loading alignment before driving any forklift onto a transport ramp. Forklifts can rapidly lose stability when the center of gravity shifts outside the wheelbase during incline travel. Uneven ramp contact, excessive speed, or incorrect approach angle can create sudden rear tip exposure. A forklift's stability triangle changes dramatically on an incline. When weight transfers beyond the rear stability line, gravity rotates the machine backward faster than steering or braking can recover it. Inspect the ramp, alignment, and weight limits before loading begins. Use controlled speed, straight entry, proper restraint systems, and trained forklift loading procedures. Inside a workshop, a lathe workpiece loses secure hold during rotation, and the spinning metal rapidly redirects across the workspace. Lathe workpieces must be secured, balanced, and tested at low speed before full rotation. Check the chuck, clamps, balance, tool contact, and machine speed before bringing the lathe up to full speed. At a backyard roof access point, a short ladder stops below the edge, and the final transition rapidly reduces stable support during the step-off. Roof access ladders must extend above the landing point and be secured before use. Extend the ladder at least 3 feet above the roof edge so there is a firm handhold during the transition. Secure both the top and bottom to prevent movement, and keep 3 points of contact throughout the climb and step-off. A short ladder removes the handhold needed during the transition from the rungs to the roof surface. At the roof edge, body weight shifts before stable footing is fully established, reducing support during the movement. Set the ladder higher and secure it before climbing. No secure step-off, no roof access. At a demolition site, repeated strikes hit a standing brick wall section until the structure suddenly loses support and the surface shifts outward. Demolition work must follow a controlled sequence because every removed section changes how weight and force travel through the structure. Disturbing one support area can rapidly shift loads and trigger collapse in unexpected directions. Inside an active automatic car wash, the driver reaches toward the rear area of the vehicle, and a door opens just as the wash system begins moving. Do not exit a vehicle or open any door once an automatic car wash cycle has started. Remain seated with all doors fully closed until the conveyor and moving equipment completely stop. Automatic car wash systems move vehicles through narrow equipment paths with minimal side clearance. Opening a door suddenly expands the vehicle's profile into the active machine path, while brushes, rails, and conveyor movement continue operating at constant force. Automatic systems expect the vehicle to remain sealed and stationary inside. Once the wash cycle begins, stay inside and keep every door completely closed. The rear door of the box truck swings open, and the stacked cargo suddenly shifts outward toward the unloading area. Check load stability and secure stacked cargo before opening truck doors or entering unloading zones, especially after transport where braking, turning, and vibration may shift materials toward the exit. During a demolition pull on site, an excavator suddenly shifts backward as the hydraulic jaw separates from stable positioning near the boom. Operate demolition attachments within verified load limits and avoid sudden pulling force that can overload hydraulic couplers, pins, and boom connection points during structural teardown work. Demolition jaws transfer massive torsional and shear loads through hydraulic pins and couplers. When the attachment binds against structural resistance, force spikes can overload mounting points faster than the operator can react. Demolition equipment can become unstable quickly once attachment loads exceed design limits. Controlled pulling force and constant load awareness help reduce sudden attachment movement during structural teardown work. Material bags were being transferred between 2 running conveyors when unsecured clothing entered the exposed transfer area near the moving rollers. Conveyor transfer areas must have guarded pinch points, emergency stops, and strict clothing clearance rules whenever material is moved between active belts. At a construction yard, a wedged plank tip, poor footing, and one bad lean suddenly redirected stored force through the material. Don't force timber by leaning body weight into the material or trailer frame. Secure the plank, use proper cutting tools, and keep the rebound path clear before applying force. A bent or wedged plank stores elastic energy until the tip releases. Poor footing near a steel frame leaves little room to recover once that stored force redirects through the material. Even simple materials can store energy under tension. Control the plank, tool, stance, and release path before forcing any brake. The elevator doors were forced open by external force, and the entire door track system immediately reacted against the movement. Keep hands and things away from operating elevator doors and let the system complete its intended movement cycle. Elevator doors move with controlled motor force, synchronized tracks, and safety interlocks. Interfering with that motion can damage rollers, guides, sensors, and create sudden pinch path exposure between moving panels. The cleaning hose pointed the wrong direction for 1 second, and the entire pressure release surged across the workshop. Release stored pressure and secure the discharge path before opening or cleaning any blasting system under pressure. Compressed air cleaning systems can release sudden high-energy spray, debris, and hose whip when pressure remains trapped inside the equipment. Uncontrolled discharge paths can instantly spread force across nearby tools, surfaces, and walking areas. Pressurized systems store energy even after shutdown. When a valve or fitting opens unexpectedly, compressed air rapidly expands outward, creating a powerful pressure release stream and hose movement. Bleed stored pressure completely before opening, disconnecting, or cleaning blasting equipment. Use lockout procedures, controlled venting, and secure hose positioning before maintenance begins. In a parking garage, an unsecured yellow SUV begins moving during a close inspection, and the available service space rapidly narrows. Vehicles must be fully secured before any close-range inspection or service begins. Shut the engine down, confirm park, set the parking brake, use wheel chocks, and keep a clear exit path before entering a tight space. Inside a tunnel, a planned detonation sends intense sound energy through the work area. But hands over ears are not hearing protection. Blast noise requires certified hearing protection, controlled distance, and clear procedures before detonation. Use proper hearing protection, follow blast procedures, keep the required distance, and communicate through controlled signals before detonation. A detonation sends intense sound energy and pressure through the tunnel environment. Hands do not create a certified seal or reduce exposure the way approved hearing protection does. Even controlled blasting requires proper PPE. Hands are not hearing protection. Along an active roadside, a rope extends outward from a parked vehicle. Then the line suddenly pulls tight across the traffic lane as vehicles continue approaching. Roadways must remain completely free of unsecured ropes, cables, or stretched materials during active traffic conditions. Isolate the area, stop vehicle movement, and secure all lines before crossing any traffic route. When tension builds inside a rope or cable, it stores mechanical energy along its length. If the line suddenly tightens across a moving path, the force transfers instantly, creating a rapidly shifting barrier across the traffic route. Tension can turn a simple rope into a sudden hazard. Control the roadway before stretching anything across it. Beneath a towering steel framework on a busy construction site, an elevated scaffold platform shifts unexpectedly, turning unstable support into uncontrolled downward movement. Do not use a scaffold unless the platform is completely secured, safely accessed, inspected, and verified stable. And never remain beneath elevated work areas without restricted entry and a clearly controlled falling object area. An unstable scaffold shifts the center of gravity and disrupts stable load distribution, allowing sudden platform movement or structural instability. Gravity continuously increases downward force, while unsecured tools and materials can rapidly spread through the active area below. Secure the platform before elevation begins. Control the access path, the load path, and the area below at all times. A routine moment at the kitchen counter changes when the cooker suddenly releases smoke and pressure across the stove area. Inspect pressure cookers and sealed cookware regularly for blocked vents, damaged seals, overheating, or pressure buildup before and during use, especially when cooking under high heat or extended pressure conditions. A roadside tree shifts during the cut, then the trunk rapidly redirects downward toward the parked loader beside it. Keep vehicles, equipment, and personnel completely outside the tree's fall path before any cut begins. Check tree lean, balance, and escape routes early because falling direction can change the moment the trunk releases. As the trunk was cut near the base, the remaining wood fibers could no longer support the tree's off-center weight. Gravity and stored tension forced the tree to rotate instantly toward the nearest weak side. Tree movement can redirect quickly once structural balance changes. Clear the entire drop zone before the final cut begins. The excavator remained active for seconds after cab exit, and uncontrolled swing movement continued across the dirt road during re-entry attempts. Do not attempt to climb into an excavator while the upper structure is still rotating. Stop all swing movement and regain full control from a safe position before re-entering the cab. During a shower glass installation, one bad edge contact suddenly released the internal stress stored within the tempered panel. Don't handle tempered glass panels without suction lifters, edge protection, controlled positioning, and full PPE. Keep the panel upright, supported, and away from hard tile or metal contact points. Tempered glass holds internal stress from the manufacturing process, giving it strength but also making edge damage critical. A small chip, corner impact, or uneven pressure point can release that stored stress through the whole sheet. Tempered glass needs controlled handling from lift to final placement. Protect the edges, support the panel, and keep the installation path clear. The compactor chamber looked clear. Then loose material shifted backward, and the loading path suddenly collapsed inward. Stay outside active compactors, balers, and loading chambers while material is shifting or compressing under force. Compaction equipment creates unpredictable stored force movement inside confined loading spaces. Loose compressed material can suddenly shift, release, or collapse when pressure changes inside the chamber. The concrete mixer stopped on the slope for a routine pour. Then the truck suddenly rolled backward through the work area. Avoid working behind or downhill from a concrete truck until the vehicle is fully secured against movement. Heavy trucks on sloped ground can lose braking stability without warning. Wet soil, loose gravel, or shifting load weight can quickly turn a parked mixer into a moving hazard path. Concrete mixers carry shifting liquid loads that continuously alter the truck's center of gravity and rolling force. Gravity and load momentum can overpower tire traction and braking resistance within seconds. Always chalk wheels, verify stable ground conditions, and establish clear escape paths before concrete placement begins. Keep reversing paths and downhill travel areas clear during mixer operation. Inside a cosmetics plant, a drum feeds into an IBC. During transfer, an incompatible reaction rapidly creates heat, vapor, and pressure inside the process area. Chemical transfers must be checked for compatibility before any material is poured or mixed. Follow the approved mixing order, ground containers, control static, verify ventilation, and keep ignition sources away from the process. On a snowy build site, a crane holds a roof panel overhead. Then changing balance rapidly redirects movement across the lift area. Suspended loads require a cleared area below before lifting, moving, or positioning begins. Clear the space under the load, use tag lines from a safe position, and wait until the panel is landed and secured before any nearby work continues. A suspended roof panel can shift position when wind, rigging tension, or balance changes. Once movement begins, the load's weight and momentum can rapidly exceed manual positioning control. No work under a lifted load. Land it, secure it, then approach. Beside a deep excavation site, a crawler crane hoists heavy equipment upward from the pit floor. Then the suspended load suddenly shifts, pulling the crane unexpectedly toward the edge. All lifting operations must use correctly rated rigging, balanced load control, and stable positioning to prevent sudden movement during hoisting. Uncontrolled shifts and suspended loads can instantly destabilize nearby equipment and structures. Inside a busy pipe storage yard, bundled materials are prepared for hoisting. Then, as the crane takes the load, an unsecured object suddenly shifts free above the designated lift zone. Lifting zones must remain fully controlled during crane operations, with clear exclusion areas beneath suspended loads and along the entire rigging path. No personnel should remain under active lifting equipment or unsecured overhead components. During lifting, force transfers through slings, hooks, and connection points while the load adjusts to balance in motion. If an object becomes loose or improperly secured, gravity immediately accelerates it downward, while crane movement and vibration can increase instability throughout the suspended system. Anything unsecured above becomes a falling hazard below. Control the lift zone before the load leaves the ground. One wet patch on the workshop floor suddenly redirects a routine step across the surface near active equipment. Clean oil, water, and grease from workshop walking surfaces immediately before they create slip hazards around active equipment. Mark and isolate slippery areas until the floor is fully cleaned and safe for movement. Inside the ship engine room, a strike against the pressurized pipe connection suddenly opens the fitting and rapidly releases fluid across the compartment. Isolate, depressurize, and verify all piping systems before striking, loosening, or working on pressurized connections inside active equipment areas. Pressurized pipes contain stored fluid energy behind valves and fittings. When the pipe wall or connection is weakened by impact, internal pressure escapes instantly through the failure point at high velocity. Even minor impacts can trigger violent failure in pressurized systems. Release stored energy and verify isolation before touching active pipe. A sheetrock panel was being carried on a metal cart through a crowded workshop. Then the cart tilted and the panel moved outside its supported position. Sheetrock and wide panels should be moved on carts designed for sheet material, with secured contact points and balanced loading. Metal carts must be checked for load fit and stability before movement. A welding arc beside a raised car reached combustible materials within the vehicle, creating an ignition hazard around the work area. Don't perform hot work on or near vehicles until fuel lines, vapors, batteries, upholstery, and nearby combustibles are checked and controlled. Use fire blankets, ventilation, isolation checks, and a ready extinguisher before welding or cutting begins. Welding creates intense heat, sparks, and molten metal that can ignite hidden fuel vapors or flammable vehicle materials. Combustible components can allow ignition to travel beyond the original hot work area. Vehicle hot work needs fuel control before the first spark. Check, isolate, shield, and prepare fire response before starting the job. The suspended ring looked stable inside the fabrication shop. Then the crane load suddenly dropped through the work area. Keep clear of suspended loads whenever crane movement or rigging adjustments are still actively underway. Suspended steel sections can rotate, swing, or drop when balance shifts during lifting. A fish truck unloading in the rain looked routine until a storage panel opened and thousands of fish surged across the loading area. Verify load pressure and containment stability before opening or releasing any unsecured cargo container. Liquid and loose material cargo can surge outward when restraints fail or container doors open unevenly. Wet pavement, moving product, and sudden spill force can instantly create slip exposure and uncontrolled movement around vehicles. Shifting cargo builds lateral pressure against container panels during transport. Once the latch releases, gravity and stored load pressure rapidly force material outward. Inspect container restraints and release mechanisms before unloading wet or shifting cargo. Control the unloading area and keep personnel clear of potential spill paths during release operations. At a loading bay, one stack is pulled from the trailer, and the adjacent load rapidly shifts outward beside it. Stacked loads must be checked for contact, support, and movement before any section is pulled from a trailer. Separate the stacks, secure the remaining load, unload one section at a time, and keep all movement paths clear. On a roofing job setup, a gas hose fails under pressure, and the released line rapidly redirects movement while gas spreads through the work area. Gas equipment must be inspected before pressure is opened through the system. Check hoses, fittings, couplings, leaks, cracks, and pressure damage, and keep ignition sources controlled before starting the job. On a roofing job setup, a gas hose fails under pressure, and the released line rapidly redirects movement while gas spreads through the work area. Inspect the hose before opening the valve. No secure line, no gas flow. Along a steep hillside work area, a large tree begins separating from its cut base. Then the slope suddenly redirects the trunk's movement across the terrain. Tree removal operations must always include a protected fall area and a planned retreat route before cutting starts. Stay well outside the expected movement path and never rely on the tree falling exactly as intended. Inside a busy kitchen, a sealed pressure cooker rattles with trapped steam while someone reaches toward the lid, unaware the container is still holding compressed force inside. Pressurized cooking equipment must never be opened until all internal steam has been fully released and pressure indicators confirm the vessel is safe. Residual pressure inside sealed systems can release rapidly the moment the seal is disturbed. A pressure cooker works by trapping steam inside a sealed chamber, allowing heat and pressure to rise above normal atmospheric conditions. This stored pressure pushes continuously against the lid and locking mechanism. If the seal opens too early, the compressed steam expands instantly outward, converting stored thermal pressure into a powerful release of force and hot vapor. A sealed vessel can still hold hidden energy long after heating stops. Release the pressure first, then approach the lid. In the hillside excavation zone, an excavator cuts into unstable ground when the loose soil beneath the tracks suddenly shifts down the slope. Verify slope stability, ground support, and machine positioning before excavating near embankments, loose soil, or unsupported hillside cuts. Inside the fabrication shop, an energized machine suddenly reacts the moment contact reaches the exposed connection area. Isolate power and verify zero energy before touching electrical connections, exposed terminals, or energized machine components. Apply lockout procedures and control stored electrical or mechanical energy to prevent sudden startup and unexpected machine movement during maintenance. Unexpected electrical activation can instantly trigger motors, actuators, or moving assemblies without warning. Stored electrical or mechanical energy can create sudden motion strong enough to rapidly redirect tools, panels, or machine components through nearby work areas. Unexpected startup hazards can begin before the machine fully moves. Lockout, zero energy testing, and safe positioning prevent sudden machine reaction incidents. A tow lift grabbed the truck's front body instead of the chassis, and the lifting force concentrated into a non-structural attachment point. Tow and recovery lifts must connect to structural load-bearing points, not weak body panels, bumpers, or front sheet metal. The chassis should be strapped, balanced, and verified before any suspended movement begins. A phone screen took attention off the table, and the hot kettle landed on the edge of a wooden decor piece instead of a stable surface, turning a relaxed moment into a hot liquid spill risk. Phone use should stop during hot liquid handling. Set kettles down only after confirming full base support, centered placement, and space around the container. When the kettle rested on the decor's edge, part of its base had no support underneath. The liquid weight shifted the center of gravity past the contact point, tipping the container into a pour. Distraction changes simple placement into a spill setup. Put the phone down before lifting, setting, or moving hot liquids. The kettle looked stable on the table. Then the hot liquid suddenly tipped and splashed across the seating area. Keep hot liquid containers away from edges, unstable surfaces, and loose cables that can shift unexpectedly. Hot liquid containers can rapidly tip when weight distribution shifts or surfaces move unexpectedly. Steam, splash force, and slippery flooring can instantly create hot liquid exposure and unstable walking conditions in confined indoor spaces. One bag came loose from the warehouse stack, and the entire storage wall suddenly collapsed behind it. Check stack support and unloading sequence before removing materials from any tall storage row. Large storage stacks can shift when one section is pulled from the base or middle without proper sequencing. Uneven load distribution increases pressure transfer across the stack, causing surrounding materials to lose balance and collapse outward. Tall stacked loads rely on balanced compression and uniform support across each layer. Removing one support point can shift the center of gravity and trigger a chain reaction collapse. Follow safe unloading sequences and maintain stable stack geometry during material removal. Keep clear access zones around tall storage stacks to reduce collapse exposure. Outside a glass shop, a large glass panel is lowered from a trailer ramp. but unstable support rapidly redirects the load during landing. Large glass panels must land only on rated stands or approved support systems designed for the load. Use rated glass stands, A-frame racks, padded contact points, suction lifters, and a controlled landing plan before lowering the panel. A compressed air hose is misdirected during horseplay, and stored pressure rapidly turns the situation unsafe. Never, ever aim compressed air at another person. Use airlines only for approved work tasks. Keep nozzles pointed away from people at all times, and stop any prank behavior around pressurized equipment before it creates an unsafe situation. Compressed air releases stored force faster than the body can reposition away from it. Even a small nozzle can concentrate pressure into a narrow stream when the hose is handled improperly. Compressed air is a tool, not a toy. No prank is worth pressurized force. Inside a residential courtyard, a ladder is positioned beneath an upper balcony without stable support. Then movement between the elevated access points suddenly shifts the setup out of place. Ladders must always rest on stable, secured surfaces before being used for elevated access. Transferring between balconies, roofs, or upper levels should never rely on unsecured ladder positioning or improvised support setup. Outside a roadside repair shop, a three-wheeled scooter remains parked on uneven ground. Then the vehicle slowly begins drifting downhill along the slope. Vehicles and mobile equipment must always be secured when parked on sloped or unstable surfaces. Use wheel blocks, parking brakes, or stable positioning methods to prevent unintended rolling movement. On an incline, gravity continuously pulls weight downhill. If the resisting force from brakes, wheel friction, or surface grip becomes weaker than that pull, the vehicle begins moving. As the scooter rolls, momentum increases, making the motion harder to stop as speed and force build over distance. Unsecured movement starts quietly, but builds fast. Control the wheels before gravity takes control instead. Inside the motorcycle repair area, sparks reach fuel vapors and heat rapidly spreads across the workshop floor. Keep grinding, welding, and electrical work completely separated from exposed fuel systems, leaking fluids, and vapor-filled repair areas. At the worksite area, unstable movement suddenly develops beside the dump truck as positioning shifts near the scaffolding edge. Use fully secured scaffolding platforms with stable footing, guardrails, and fall protection before starting elevated work beside active vehicles or loading areas. Inspect platform access, edge protection, and work positioning continuously. Uneven weight distribution and unstable positioning can rapidly shift the center of gravity beyond the platform's stable support area. Without guardrails or tie-off systems, momentum can continue beyond the protected working surface once stability changes. Scaffolding hazards appear the moment stability and protection are missing. Secure the platform fully before elevated work begins. Beside a high-rise shell, a tower crane experienced abnormal mass deflection during a routine lift as loading conditions exceeded structural stability limits. Tower cranes must operate within load chart limits with verified foundation support, mass ties, counterweight balance, wind conditions, and swing radius before lifting begins. Any abnormal mass deflection or unstable base movement requires immediate stop work and engineering review. A steel coil was being rotated from forklift forks when a rigging connection lost support, rapidly transferring force into the forklift structure. Rigging connections must be rated, inspected, and matched to the load before any coil rotation or suspended movement begins. Hooks, slings, shackles, and attachment points must be protected from side loading and shock loading. Rotating a suspended coil changes the force direction through the rigging. When load support was lost, stored force rapidly transferred back into the forklift structure and lifting system. Rigging failure can transfer massive force back into the equipment. Inspect the connector, control the rotation, and never shock load a suspended coil. One hammer strike hit the hydraulic cylinder, and trapped pressure instantly discharged through the assembly. Avoid striking hydraulic components until trapped pressure is verified, released during dismantling or maintenance work. Hydraulic cylinders can contain trapped fluid pressure even when disconnected from equipment. Impact force on fittings or retaining components can weaken seals, release restraints, and trigger sudden pressure discharge. The stacked crates looked stable beside the roadside until one movement triggered the entire column to collapse outward. Build storage stacks only with proper interlocking, support, and protection against outward collapse. Stacked materials can become unstable when height exceeds safe support limits or lower rows shift unevenly. Small movement at the base can rapidly transfer force upward and release the entire stack outward. Tall stacks store vertical load energy through compression and gravity. Once the center of balance moves outside the support base, structure collapses in a cascading chain reaction. Limit stack height and secure storage rows with stable alignment and support systems. Keep walk paths and work areas clear from the fall path of stacked materials. Inside a workshop, an unsecured stepladder takes weight before it is fully stabilized, and the frame rapidly loses alignment under the load. Stepladders must be fully opened, locked, level, and stable before any climb begins. Lock the spreaders, place all feet on firm ground, maintain 3 points of contact, and use a second person when the task needs support. Inside a molten metal processing area, a lifting system raises a glowing hot vessel from its station. Then the container suddenly loses balance, allowing molten material to spread beyond the transfer area. Molten material transfers require verified lifting connections, balanced handling, and controlled movement zones at every stage of the lift. Any instability, sudden shift, or failed support near molten contents can rapidly create an uncontrolled release hazard. Inside a crowded industrial yard, a gas cylinder suddenly accelerates across the ground after compressed gas rapidly releases from the valve assembly. Compressed gas cylinders must always be secured, capped, and handled using approved procedures. Damaged or exposed valves can instantly turn stored pressure into uncontrolled movement if containment is lost. Gas cylinders store energy under extremely high internal pressure. When the valve breaks or opens unexpectedly, the escaping gas releases force in one direction, creating an equal reactive force that propels the cylinder in the opposite direction like a thrust-driven projectile. Stored pressure can become motion in a split second. Protect the valve, or the cylinder controls itself. Inside the lithium battery factory, smoke rises from stored battery cells as unstable heat rapidly spreads through the production area. Store, charge, and handle lithium batteries only with active thermal monitoring, isolation controls, and emergency suppression systems fully in place before operations begin. Separate damaged or overheating cells immediately. Along a roadside transport route, a loaded utility truck suddenly shifts outside stable positioning beside passing traffic. Secure and balance all loads before transport, especially on uneven roads or sharp turns. Reduce speed through curves and shifting terrain because unstable weight can overturn a vehicle in seconds. A high center of gravity and shifting load can rapidly transfer momentum sideways during steering or imbalance. Once lateral force exceeds tire grip and suspension stability, the vehicle can rapidly move outside its stable operating position. Vehicle stability starts with proper load balance before the trip even begins. Poor loading control can quickly create dangerous instability during normal road movement. During a skip drop-off, the container weight transferred force back through the hook lift system and reduced chassis stability. Hook lift containers must be dropped only within the truck's rated capacity, correct angle, and stable ground conditions. Stop the operation if the container resists release or begins pulling the chassis out of balance. The road crew hose whipped loose behind the service truck, turning stored pressure into an uncontrolled moving hazard path. Stay outside the movement range of pressurized hoses or unsecured hydraulic cleaning lines during active operations. Pressurized lines can recoil instantly when fittings loosen, pressure surges, or restraints fail. The hose energy can create uncontrolled whipping motion across nearby traffic and work areas. In a crowded wine storage aisle, unsecured racking suddenly lost stability, sending shelves and bottles into uncontrolled motion, triggering a rapid chain reaction that spread through the storage area within moments. Never, ever rely on storage racks that are unsecured, damaged, overloaded, or missing approved anchorage to the floor or structure. When load weight shifts, a tall rack's center of gravity can move beyond its support base. Without anchoring and bracing, one unstable section can trigger a progressive aisle collapse. Storage racks are load-bearing structures. Verify anchorage, bracing, load limits, and structural integrity before the aisle is used or stocked. Outside a building, a ladder is set beside energized wiring, and electrical arcing rapidly connects through the setup area. Ladders must stay well clear of energized wiring unless power is isolated and the setup is controlled by qualified electrical crews. Keep safe clearance, isolate power first, use non-conductive equipment, and let qualified electrical crews control the work. Electricity can arc across small gaps or transfer through conductive surfaces such as metal, moisture, and ladder components. Once a conductive route forms, electrical energy transfers through the connected path immediately. Check overhead power before setting the ladder. No isolation, no climb. Inside an auto shop, a pull on a loose cable triggered a chain of shifting movement that rapidly redirected the suspended frame toward the vehicle below. Trace the full cable path before pulling. Remove loose tools and trip hazards, and keep the line fully visible during movement. On a work platform, a large steel plate separates at the cut, and the released section rapidly redirects movement before support is fully engaged. Structural steel must be supported, rigged, and secured before the final cut is made. Use lifting gear, tag lines, clamps, sequencing, and a clear drop plan before separating the plate. Once the cut releases the steel, the unsupported weight immediately transfers under gravity. Without rigging or clamps in place, the plate can rapidly change position beyond manual positioning control. Secure the steel before the cut. No support, no separation. Beside an industrial liquid basin, a narrow concrete walkway runs along an exposed tank edge. Then, unstable surface conditions suddenly redirect movement toward the unprotected basin boundary. Open process tanks and basins must be protected with fixed guardrails, secured covers, marked walkways, and slip-resistant access surfaces. Keep all travel paths clearly separated from exposed edges and maintain strong visibility around hazardous drop areas. Inside a heavy equipment workshop, a large engine assembly hangs suspended during lifting. Then the load suddenly loses support and drops vertically beneath the hoisting system. Suspended machinery must always use verified lifting points, balanced rigging, and controlled exclusion boundaries beneath the lift path. Any instability, shifted connection, or failed attachment can instantly redirect the full weight of the load downward under gravity. Heavy mechanical assemblies carry concentrated mass that depends entirely on rigging tension and secure attachment points during lifting. If a connection shifts, loosens, or fails, gravity immediately accelerates the suspended load downward, while momentum increases rapidly due to the weight of the assembly. A suspended load remains stable only while every lifting connection stays secure. Establish the exclusion boundary before the load leaves the ground. In the residential work area, a large tree trunk suddenly shifts during the cut and redirects movement toward the nearby house. Plan the full drop direction before cutting large trees near homes, buildings, or confined residential spaces. Use escape paths, guide lines, and controlled support systems. Inside a livestock holding area, a large pig suddenly moves over the enclosure barrier and enters the narrow workspace. Use secure barriers and controlled positioning before entering confined livestock handling areas. Maintain escape space and safe distance around large animals, because sudden movement and force can close space. Instantly inside enclosures, large animals can generate sudden force and momentum with little warning in confined environments. When balance, footing, or containment shifts unexpectedly, reaction time becomes extremely limited. Livestock hazards come from size, movement, and unpredictability inside tight spaces. Proper barriers and controlled distance are critical during animal handling operations. While repositioning a steel pipe on the fabrication platform, the heavy section suddenly moved outside its secured support position. Steel pipes and round stock must be secured with stable supports and controlled handling methods before repositioning begins. Maintain positioning outside suspended load and unstable material paths during handling operation. A motor grader tried pushing a road roller up the trailer ramp until the roller moved outside its stable alignment on the incline. Road rollers must be loaded using controlled drive power or approved towing methods. Never use another machine to push heavy equipment up a trailer ramp without verified alignment, traction, and stability. The motor grader's pushing force transferred extra momentum into the road roller while the roller climbed the incline. Once traction and alignment shifted, the roller's center of gravity moved outside the ramp line. Pushing equipment onto ramps can overpower stability fast. Use controlled loading methods, maintain alignment, and never force a roller up the trailer. The overloaded three-wheeler leaned harder with every turn. Then the entire load balance shifted across the intersection. Operate transport vehicles only with secured, balanced cargo and within safe loading limits on public roads. High stacked loads raise the vehicle's center of gravity and reduce stability during braking, turning, or uneven surface transitions. Sudden weight transfer can overpower the suspension and push the vehicle beyond its stable operating range. In a manufacturing yard, a suspended steel coil was being rotated beside a forklift when the entire rigging setup suddenly gave way, turning a routine handling task into a serious near miss within seconds. Never, ever rotate a suspended coil by hand unless the lift is engineered for load turning. The rigging is rated for the movement, and everyone remains clear of the load path. As a suspended coil is turned, its center of gravity shifts and the rigging tension changes direction. If the lifting arrangement is not designed for that motion, forces can rapidly overload or destabilize the setup. Plan load turning operations before the lift begins. Keep personnel clear and use equipment designed for controlled rotation. Inside a sheet cutting machine, the workbed is accessed for material removal, and the gantry rapidly moves across the table area. Machine beds must stay off limits until power is isolated, motion is stopped, and zero movement is verified. Stop the machine, lock out the energy, confirm the gantry cannot move, and remove material only through approved access procedure. On a construction site, stacked form panels are pulled from the bundle, and shifting balance rapidly redirects movement across the stack. Stacked panels need bracing or mechanical support before any section is pulled or separated. Secure the bundle first. Separate panels one at a time. Use lifting equipment and keep all movement paths clear. Stacked panels carry weight through their full length. Once the bundle moves beyond its balance point, gravity rapidly redirects the unsupported sections outward. Brace the stack before touching it. No control, no manual pull. During unloading on an elevated truck platform, a motorcycle remains positioned on the ramp. Then the raised platform suddenly lowers as the support pressure releases beneath the load. Raised platforms must always be protected with locking pins, mechanical restraints, or secondary support systems before unloading begins. Hydraulic pressure alone should never be trusted to hold suspended weight in place. Hydraulic systems hold loads by maintaining pressurized fluid inside sealed components. If pressure escapes through leakage, valve failure, or system weakness, the supporting force drops immediately, allowing gravity to pull the platform and load downward without warning. Hydraulic pressure can disappear faster than expected. Lock the platform before relying on the lift system. Inside a quiet cafe workspace, a glass front cooler suddenly released smoke and heat during normal operations. Do not ignore overheating signs, damaged wiring, unusual smells, or overloaded refrigeration equipment in commercial spaces. As a pickup truck moves along the rough construction road, stacked panels suddenly shift across the moving bed. Secure stacked materials before vehicle movement and keep workers completely off unstable loads during transport. Stop the vehicle before unloading or repositioning cargo, because shifting materials can slide unexpectedly on rough terrain. Vehicle movement, uneven terrain, and vibration changed the load's center of gravity, causing the stacked sheets to shift outward. Without restraints or stable positioning, gravity and momentum rapidly increased movement across the truck bed. Loads can shift faster than expected during transport. Secure cargo fully and keep all movement areas clear during vehicle operation. A fuel transfer beside the vacuum tanker suddenly lost ignition control. As fuel vapor reached an ignition source near the roadside setup, fuel transfer must use grounded equipment, verified hose connections, vapor control, and full ignition source isolation before any fuel movement begins. Keep extinguishers ready and stop the transfer at the first sign of leakage or abnormal heat. A A suspended crane hook block suddenly entered an uncontrolled swing path after the crane line lost stable tension control. Maintain clear exclusion zones around suspended crane hardware and control cable tension during repositioning. Sudden slack or unstable line movement can turn heavy hook blocks into uncontrolled swing hazards. The crane cable likely experienced a rapid tension release or uneven load balance, allowing the hook block to develop pendulum movement. Once momentum increased, the suspended hardware moved beyond its intended positioning path. Even unloaded crane hooks carry dangerous swing energy during line adjustments. Control cable movement, stabilize tension, and isolate all nearby pedestrian areas before repositioning crane lines. One chainsaw, cut on a large round timber log, suddenly reduced the stability of the unsupported setup, allowing both the log position and cutting forces to change unexpectedly. Cutting large round timber requires stable blocking, anti-roll support, and controlled body positioning. Unsupported logs can rotate instantly and redirect chainsaw force without warning. An excavator was working on a weakened bridge edge when repeated breaker force suddenly reduced the remaining structural support beneath the machine. Demolition near compromised structures requires constant stability monitoring, controlled boom reach, and safe setback positioning. Repeated hydraulic breaker force can quickly shift both structural support and machine balance beyond recovery limits. In a workyard, a tractor moves forward with limited visibility, and the walking route disappears into the machine's blind area. Heavy equipment should only move through shared routes after the full travel path is confirmed clear. Use spotters, horns, mirrors, cameras, slow speed, and separated walking routes before moving the machine. On a factory feed machine, the open roller slot is accessed while the system remains active, and the rotating rollers rapidly draw movement into the feed path. Machine clearing or adjustment must happen only after the equipment is stopped, isolated, and verified at zero motion. Stop the machine, isolate power, verify zero motion, and clear or adjust only through approved access points. Feed rollers move material forward through friction and continuous rotation. Once contact enters the roller intake area, the moving surfaces can redirect motion faster than manual repositioning can respond. Stop the motion before access. No lockout. No reach. Amid active road construction operations, a dump truck raises its loaded bed during unloading. Then the material suddenly shifts to one side, redirecting the vehicle's center of mass as the lift angle increases. Dumping operations require balanced loading, stable ground conditions, and strict control of lifting limits. Uneven weight distribution during bed elevation can quickly destabilize the vehicle and trigger sudden vehicle instability during elevation. At an open industrial worksite, a tightly wound steel coil is being cut with a torch. Then the compressed metal suddenly springs outward as the trapped force suddenly releases. Coiled or tension-loaded materials must never be cut until all stored mechanical energy has been properly restrained and released through controlled procedures. Unsecured tension can convert instantly into rapid movement once containment is broken. Steel coils store elastic energy while tightly wound under compression. Cutting into the material removes the forces holding that energy in place, allowing the metal to rapidly unwind and expand toward its natural shape. This sudden release transfers rapid motion through the coil in a fraction of a second. Stored tension can remain hidden inside solid metal. Release the force safely before breaking the restraint. Inside the industrial processing plant, unstable heat and smoke rapidly spread through the large vessel and surrounding elevated platform. Isolate flammable gases, vapors, and pressure sources before starting hot work or operating near active industrial systems. Inside an industrial work area, movement passes beside the open floor opening until unstable positioning suddenly develops near the exposed platform edge. Use marked hazard zones, secured barriers, and fixed covers to prevent exposed openings from creating unstable movement areas inside active work zones. Open pits and floor penetrations create hidden stability hazards when visibility, movement, or attention shifts momentarily. Without barriers or covers, movement near the edge can rapidly continue beyond the supported walking surface. Unprotected floor openings can become critical hazards inside busy industrial areas. Guardrails, covers, and clear markings must remain in place at all times. A baggage cart cut too close beside a parked aircraft, and the vehicle entered the wing clearance area during a tight turn near the loading zone. Ground support vehicles must maintain strict wingtip clearance and controlled travel paths around parked aircraft. Tight maneuvering near low-wing structures creates immediate collision exposure. A routine truck tire inflation suddenly released stored pressure energy from the wheel assembly during inflation. Tire inflation on heavy equipment requires pressure control, safe positioning, and remote inflation methods whenever possible. Multi-piece wheel assemblies can release extreme stored energy during failure. Compressed air stored energy inside the truck tire and wheel assembly during inflation. When load support within the assembly was lost, the stored pressure energy discharged rapidly into the surrounding area. Compressed air failures happen faster than reaction time allows. Use inflation cages, maintain safe standoff positions, and inspect wheel assemblies before applying pressure. The suspended spiral conveyor suddenly shifted, and the entire elevated work area turned unstable in seconds. Keep forklifts, lifts, and elevated platforms away from suspended equipment without verified stability and coordinated lifting control. Tall, suspended assemblies create shifting center of gravity forces during movement and positioning. Any uncontrolled sway, uneven support, or sudden load transfer can destabilize nearby equipment and create an unstable hazard area below the suspended structure. The pipe opening looked controlled for 1 second, then contaminated water pressure suddenly discharged from the line. Isolate flow and verify zero pressure before opening, loosening, or servicing sewage and drain systems. Blocked or pressurized waste lines can release sudden high-force discharge containing contaminated water, debris, and hazardous splash exposure. Standing directly in front of the opening places the body in the immediate release path. Internal fluid pressure stores energy inside confined piping systems. When a fitting or cap is loosened, pressure rapidly escapes through the nearest opening at high velocity. Isolate flow sources and relieve line pressure completely before opening drain or sewage systems. Use proper face protection, splash barriers, and side position work methods during pipe maintenance tasks. On an unfinished upper floor, bare steel beams become a temporary crossing path, and the exposed opening leaves no protected walking surface through the frame. Unfinished beams require a secured walking surface or fall protection before any crossing begins. Install temporary decking, guardrails, or approved fall protection before moving across exposed frame. Inside a small liquor shop, a heavy ceramic wine jar rolls off its stand, and one rushed reaction turns the display into an unstable moving load. Heavy containers should be secured on stable displays and cleared, not caught, once they start moving. Secure large jars on stable stands, keep displays away from narrow walk paths, and step clear when weight starts moving. A full ceramic jar carries heavy mass and rounded movement characteristics. Once it moves beyond its balance point, the weight can rapidly exceed reliable manual positioning control. Secure heavy displays before they move. If it starts falling, step clear. Inside the coal mine shaft entrance, a loaded mine cart suddenly shifts from stable positioning beside the lift opening and redirects movement toward the shaft area. Install wheel stops, secured gates, and controlled cart restraints at every open shaft entrance before moving loaded mine carts through the area. Keep carts under controlled positioning at all times. On the scissor lift inside the industrial workshop, electrical activity suddenly develops across the platform beside the energized equipment. De-energize and verify isolation before performing any work near exposed electrical systems from elevated platforms or confined access areas. Use lockout procedures, arc flash protection, and safe approach distances. Electrical arcs can form through air when voltage bridges a conductive path or damaged component. The released thermal energy expands instantly, creating intense heat and rapid energy transfer around the affected equipment. Elevated platforms can place work areas close to active electrical systems. Isolation and verification must happen before maintenance begins. One loose scaffold plank suddenly lost stable support during an overhead material transfer inside the scaffold frame. Material handling on scaffolding requires secured storage, controlled passing methods, and protected exclusion zones below elevated work areas. Loose planks can quickly become falling object hazards inside confined access paths. The timber plank likely shifted balance while being repositioned between scaffold levels. Once support was lost, gravity rapidly increased downward movement through the access opening. Unsecured materials create immediate hazards on elevated scaffold systems. Secure loose planks, stabilize transfer points, and isolate lower access routes during overhead work. Inside a workshop, a moment of inattention near an open inspection pit suddenly turned the floor edge into an unexpected hazard. Maintain full awareness when moving around inspection pits, floor openings, and service trenches. Loss of footing near an exposed edge can quickly lead to entry into the opening, especially where barriers, covers, or clearly marked boundaries are not in place. In a timber yard, improperly stacked timber bundles made forklift retrieval difficult, and when the misaligned stack was disturbed during adjustment, the entire pile suddenly shifted. Verify stack, stability before attempting to correct, reposition, or access misaligned timber bundles. Uneven stacking can create hidden instability, allowing stored gravitational forces to release suddenly when the pile is disturbed. Poor alignment shifts weight unevenly throughout the stack and reduces its stability margin. A small disturbance can move the center of gravity beyond the support base, triggering rapid movement across multiple bundles. Stack stability must be established before any adjustment or retrieval activity. If timber alignment appears unsafe, secure and restack the pile before proceeding. In a yard, a ladder sits under a tree, and a cut branch strikes the rails, rapidly shifting the setup off alignment. Branches should not be cut from a ladder placed under the drop path. Use a lift or secured work platform. Plan where the branch will fall, and keep the ladder clear of anything that can swing or drop. Inside an auto shop, a car moves forward during service, and the open bay rapidly becomes an uncontrolled travel path. Vehicle service should begin only after wheel movement is fully controlled. Confirm park or the required neutral procedure. Set the brake. Use wheel chocks at the tires and keep the full travel path clear before any service work begins. A vehicle can move when drive force reaches the wheels, even during routine service activity. Once rolling begins, the vehicle's weight and momentum rapidly increase the force needed to stop or reposition it. Secure the wheels before the work starts. No movement control, no service. Inside a building, under maintenance, a roof surface appears solid enough to walk across. Then the hidden support beneath suddenly loses stability as weight transfers onto the section. Roof access should never begin without confirming the strength and condition of the supporting structure. Fragile panels, weathered materials, or unsupported sections can fail suddenly even when the surface appears stable. High on a sharply leaning tree, cutting work continues across a bent section of trunk. Then the compressed wood suddenly snaps upward as the trapped force releases through the log. Trees under tension or compression can store significant internal force when bent, pinned, or loaded by surrounding weight. Cutting the wrong section can instantly release that energy and redirect the timber with rapid movement. A bent tree trunk stores mechanical energy through internal compression on one side and tension on the other. When a cut removes the material balancing those forces, the stored energy rapidly releases, causing the log to spring, twist, or shift toward the direction of least resistance. Wood under stress behaves like a loaded spring. Read the tension before making the cut. On the residential roadside tree cutting job, the massive trunk twists during the cut and rapidly redirects movement across the overhead power lines. Plan the full fall direction and escape path before cutting any large leaning tree near roads, homes, or active work areas. Use rigging, guidelines, and controlled support equipment to prevent uncontrolled trunk movement during the cut. Inside the timber storage warehouse, stacked logs shift out of line and unstable movement spreads across the storage bay. Secure timber stacks with chocks, restraints, and stable support systems before allowing movement around stored logs or elevated piles. Restrict access to unstable storage areas because one shifting log can transfer movement through the entire stack in seconds. Round timber can roll or separate when weight distribution changes across uneven contact points. Once one log shifts, gravity transfers through the stack and rapidly redirects movement across surrounding materials. Stored timber can quickly become unstable when stack positioning changes. Proper blocking, spacing, and controlled access help reduce shifting and rolling movement inside storage areas. A towering stack of truck tires suddenly lost stability inside the tire yard, transferring stored weight and movement forces through adjacent rows. Tire yards require stable stacking methods, controlled storage heights, and clear separation from active inflation areas. Large tires can shift suddenly and release dangerous movement energy when unstable. A forklift entered a turn too aggressively and suddenly moved outside its stability range during the maneuver. Forklift stability depends heavily on speed, steering angle, and center of gravity control, even without a carried load. Sharp turns at excessive speed can rapidly destabilize the machine. The forklift likely carried too much lateral momentum into the turn. As steering forces shifted the center of gravity outside the stability triangle, stability was rapidly reduced. Forklift stability can be lost quickly during fast directional changes. Reduce speed before turning, avoid sudden steering inputs, and maintain stable travel paths at all times. The steel cutoff looked controlled for 1 second, then the unsupported section suddenly redirected its movement path as the final connection weakened. Torch cutting operations require controlled support points and clear swing paths before completing structural cuts. Unsupported steel sections can shift, swing, or drop unpredictably once the final connection weakens. Miles of open ocean surrounded the vessel, yet its approach path gradually aligned with the offshore wind turbine without sufficient clearance. Marine navigation near offshore structures requires constant monitoring, clearance verification, and controlled maneuvering around fixed hazards. Small directional errors at sea can rapidly escalate into major impact events. The vessel continued advancing toward the turbine foundation without enough lateral clearance to safely pass. As momentum remained aligned with the structure, the available maneuvering margin rapidly disappeared. Offshore structures leave little margin for navigation mistakes once a vessel closes distance. Maintain verified approach paths, active watchkeeping, and continuous position correction near fixed marine installations. An air hose suddenly separated inside the auto workshop, turning the oil line into an uncontrolled spray path. Inspect fittings and hose connections before pressurizing fluid systems inside active maintenance areas. Compressed air can rapidly whip loose hoses and atomize fluid across surrounding equipment and walking surfaces. Poor hose restraint and pressure buildup create sudden, uncontrolled movement paths. The tanker suddenly rolled during transfer operations, pulling the hose into an uncontrolled spray release. Secure tanker position with wheel chocks, brake verification, and full stabilization right before unloading begins. Unsecured tanker movement can place extreme tension on transfer hoses and couplings. Once the vehicle shifts, the hose can separate suddenly, creating whipping motion, spill release, and unstable walking surfaces. Vehicle movement transfers force directly into connected hoses and fittings. When hose tension exceeds coupling restraint, the connection separates and pressurized flow escapes rapidly. Secure tanker position with chocks and brake verification and before connecting transfer hoses. Prevent vehicle movement first, then control pressure and confirm hose restraint systems. In a yard, a tree is cut to land in a pickup bed, but the trunk's weight rapidly exceeds the vehicle's ability to manage the load. A pickup bed should never be used to catch, stop, or control a falling tree. Plan the fall direction, clear the area, use proper rigging when needed, and keep vehicles out of the drop path. On a roadside, a bulky sack is carried up a narrow plank. One unstable step, and the load rapidly moves beyond the edge of the walkway. Heavy sacks require a stable ramp, clear footing, and controlled handling before unloading from height or moving down from an elevated surface. Use a proper loading ramp, team handling, mechanical aid, and clear footing before moving materials from height so the load stays controlled through the entire path. A heavy sack raises the center of gravity and reduces balance control during movement. A narrow plank leaves very little adjustment space when footing shifts under the load. Build a safe path before carrying the load. No stable ramp, no manual unload. At a busy container terminal, a shipping container is lifted high above the transport frame. Then the suspended load suddenly loses alignment and drops downward beneath the lifting path. Container lifting operations require verified locking systems, balanced rigging, and fully controlled load positioning at every stage of the transfer. Suspended containers must never travel above uncontrolled access areas without strict exclusion controls in place. Within a narrow excavation trench, an underground utility line is being worked on. Then the buried pipe suddenly released under pressure, redirecting high-pressure water rapidly through the confined trench space. Underground pressurized lines must always be treated as active energy systems during excavation work. Even stable-looking infrastructure can release extreme force instantly if the pipe wall or connection is compromised. Pressurized pipelines contain stored hydraulic energy that remains trapped inside the system under constant force. When the pipe structure fails, water rapidly escapes toward the lowest pressure area, creating a high-velocity surge that expands rapidly through confined spaces, such as trenches or excavations. Hidden pressure can turn a quiet line into a sudden force path. Control the system before disturbing what's underground. On the narrow roadside, a motorcycle moves beside the forklift's travel route while the forks extend into the shared roadway area. Separate loading zones from passing traffic with barriers, spotters, and controlled access to prevent forklift equipment from extending into shared travel areas. Inside an auto repair bay, a raised sedan suddenly shifts outside stable positioning on the hoist arms above the floor. Verify lift arm placement, vehicle balance points, and mechanical lock engagement before positioning beneath any raised vehicle. Inspect hoist contact points carefully. Vehicle lifts rely on equal weight distribution across designated lift points. A small arm misalignment or unstable center of gravity can rapidly shift the load and overcome the hoist support geometry. Raised vehicles place large, elevated loads directly above the workspace. Proper lift positioning and lock checks help maintain stable vehicle support during servicing. The deflated split rim tire refused to seal on the bead. Then the fire inflation attempt rapidly increased pressure inside the partially seated assembly. Split rim and tubeless heavy equipment tires require controlled bead seating, approved inflation procedures, and exclusion zones around locking ring assemblies. Open flame inflation methods can rapidly destabilize trapped pressure inside partially seated tire systems. A cement mixer only moved a few inches, then the rotating surface created an uncontrolled entanglement path around the moving load. Rotating cylindrical loads create powerful entanglement hazards when loose clothing or body positioning enter the movement path. Rolling materials must stay restrained before handling. As the concrete pipe rotated across the ground, friction at the moving surface created a continuous pulling force along the rotation path. Once material entered that path, the pipe's momentum continued transferring movement around the rotating surface. Rolling loads can create entanglement hazards whenever unsecured materials enter the rotation path. Secure clothing, maintain separation from rotating materials, and block cylindrical loads before repositioning them. The lift platform suddenly dropped inside the shaft during repair work, moving unexpectedly without warning. Lock out power, secure the platform, and install fall protection before beginning any lift maintenance. Unsupported elevator platforms can descend rapidly if lifting components fail or stored energy releases unexpectedly. Repair work inside open shafts increases exposure to collapse paths, pinch points, and uncontrolled platform movement. The granite slab shifted mid-air, and the forklift's center of gravity suddenly moved beyond its stable range. Use forklifts as lifting equipment only after verifying load weight, center, capacity, and ground stability. Large stone slabs create unstable suspended loads that can rapidly shift the forklift's balance point. Elevated loads increase forward tipping force and can overload the mast, forks, or support surface. Forklifts stay stable only while the combined center of gravity remains inside the stability triangle. When the granite slab swung outward, the load moment exceeded the forklift's counterweight balance, causing a forward overturn. Keep suspended loads low, centered, and within rated lifting capacity before moving stone materials. Use approved lifting attachments, load calculations, and exclusion zones to control shifting load hazards. In the woods, a ladder is braced against the same tree as it is cut. Then the branch swings back and rapidly shifts the setup out of alignment. Branch cutting from ladders requires a clear swing path, controlled support, and a setup kept away from moving limbs. Plan the cut, control the branch with rope, use a lift or proper climbing system, and keep ladders out of the limb's return path. On a roadside work truck, unsecured equipment shifts during travel, and a heavy unit rapidly moves beyond the edge of the deck beside the truck. A truck should not move until every piece of equipment is strapped, blocked, balanced, and checked for secure placement. Secure equipment with rated tie-downs, balance the load across the deck, inspect all restraints before movement, and keep the truck side clear during loading, unloading, or transport. Vehicle motion adds vibration, braking force, and side-to-side sway to transported cargo. Without proper restraints, equipment weight can shift across the deck and rapidly move beyond stable positioning. Secure the load before the truck moves. No tie-downs, no transport. At a tree removal site, the final cuts reach deep into the trunk base. Then the lower section suddenly splits apart, redirecting part of the wood backward as the stored force rapidly releases. Felling large trees requires controlled cutting methods and safe positioning outside the potential split or kickback path. Internal tension within the trunk can release suddenly during cutting, especially when compression forces build near the base. Always maintain a clear retreat route away from the projected movement area. At a roadside equipment loading area, one heavy machine drives against another to force it onto a trailer ramp. Then the combined weight suddenly shifts, redirecting the combined load outside the trailer's stable support alignment. Equipment loading operations should rely on controlled winching or guided pulling systems rather than pushing force. Maintaining stable alignment and controlled movement is essential to prevent sudden balance loss during ramp loading. As heavy equipment moves up a ramp, the center of gravity rises and shifts rearward. When pushing force is added from behind, momentum and uneven weight transfer can move the balance point outside the trailer's support base, allowing gravity to shift the system beyond stable support alignment. Force applied in the wrong direction can overturn the entire load path. Control the movement before the balance disappears. Inside a metal processing plant, unstable thermal activity suddenly spreads from molten aluminum across the work area. Keep moisture and incompatible materials completely away from molten aluminum operations. Inspect all tools, surfaces, and containers before contact with molten metal to prevent dangerous thermal reactions. Inside the foundry floor, the routine molten metal operation suddenly releases intense heat and sparks across the work area. Keep damp tools, sealed containers, and contaminated scrap completely out of molten metal processing areas. Inspect and dry all charging materials before furnace operations to prevent sudden steam expansion and molten metal ejection. When trapped moisture contacts molten metal, it rapidly expands into steam beneath the surface. The sudden pressure buildup can redirect molten material and thermal energy outward through the surrounding work area. Molten metal reacts instantly to hidden moisture and contamination. Dry material checks and controlled charging procedures help reduce sudden thermal reactions during furnace operations. An excavator looked completely shut down during maintenance. Then stored hydraulic energy suddenly reactivated movement within the bucket linkage system. Heavy equipment maintenance requires full lockout, hydraulic isolation, and secured attachment support before entering any bucket or linkage zone. Stored hydraulic energy can reactivate machine movement without warning at any moment. A ladder placed against the roof edge shifted on a smooth surface, and the entire setup lost stability in seconds. Ladders must be secured at the top and placed on stable, slip-resistant ground before climbing. Extension ladders should maintain proper angle setup and remain clear of smooth surfaces, debris, or shifting contact points. As body weight transferred onto the ladder, the smooth surface reduced friction at the base contact points. Once the support balance shifted outside the ladder's center line, the structure rapidly lost stability against the wall surface. One unstable ladder setup can quickly remove safe climbing support, secure footing, proper angle control, and stable contact points prevent ladder movement. The rail snapped loose under the torch, and stored tension turned the steel into an uncontrolled moving hazard. Secure both ends and identify stored force before cutting long rails or tensioned metal sections. Metal under tension can release instantly during hot work. Once the cut weakens the structure, the remaining force path can suddenly shift, whip, rotate, or redirect the material without warning. The SUV never even reached the tow bed before the lifting frame suddenly snapped downward onto the vehicle. Keep towing frames and lifting bars within rated angle and capacity during every recovery operation. Improper load positioning, uneven tension, or unstable lifting geometry can rapidly transfer force into the weakest structural point. Once the support system loses alignment, suspended metal components can fail and collapse into the surrounding area. The tow frame was carrying an off-balance load while extended above the vehicle roofline. As the lifting force shifted, the unsupported structure lost stability, and gravity drove the frame downward into the SUV. Confirm lifting angles, attachment points, and equipment ratings before attempting vehicle recovery operations. Keep vehicles and personnel outside the suspended load path and swing area whenever towing equipment is under load. The garbage truck rounded the curve too aggressively, and the rear riding positions suddenly lost stability beside the moving vehicle. Ride exterior garbage truck steps only at safe turning speeds and during controlled steering maneuvers. Rear riding platforms expose crews to sudden lateral force, unstable footing, and shifting body momentum during turns. Sharp directional changes can rapidly move stability outside the supported riding position. As the truck entered the curve, centrifugal force shifted movement outward away from the vehicle's turning center. The rapid side loading reduced grip and stable footing on the rear riding area, causing uncontrolled separation from the truck path. Reduce speed before turns and maintain smooth steering during collection route operations. Exterior riding positions should only be used within safe operating speeds and controlled roadway conditions. In a material yard, a car tows a stacked trailer across a forklift travel path with extended forks, and the shared lane rapidly loses safe separation. Mixed yard traffic needs separated routes, controlled speed, and clear right-of-way before any vehicle moves. Use marked routes, spotters, speed limits, mirrors, and clear traffic rules before forklifts, loaders, cars, or trailers move through the yard. Inside a small shop, a heavy fridge tips forward as crates are moved, and the walkway rapidly fills with unstable moving weight. Heavy fridges must be anchored or kept stable before activity starts around them, or foot traffic moves through the area. Anchor the fridge, keep loads clear of its base, avoid pulling, leaning, or stacking against it, and maintain a clear path around it so the walkway stays stable. A fridge has a tall, heavy frame with much of its weight carried above a narrow base. Once that balance moves beyond the support point, gravity rapidly redirects the load forward beyond reliable manual positioning control. Secure the fridge before the shop gets busy. No anchor, no stable walkway. Inside a repair workshop, a servicing unit is opened during fluid maintenance. Then trapped pressure suddenly releases, redirecting the container upward, while fluid rapidly spreads through the surrounding area. Before opening any pressurized fluid system, ensure all internal pressure has been safely released and the container is fully stabilized. Sealed systems can retain stored force even after equipment appears inactive. Inside a tight construction workspace, excess weight concentrates onto a small, elevated platform. Then shifting movement and uneven weight begin to destabilize the entire structure. Work platforms must remain within their designed capacity and provide enough space for stable movement and secure footing. Overcrowding, poor positioning, and uneven loading can quickly reduce stability during elevated tasks. Elevated platforms rely on balanced weight distribution to remain stable under load. As movement and materials shift, the center of gravity changes across the surface. In confined spaces, uneven force concentration and sudden movement can overload support points, causing instability throughout the platform structure. Limited space increases every movement risk. Control the load and positioning before stability changes. Inside the textile production line, loose clothing reaches the moving conveyor and rapidly redirects movement through the pull point system. Keep loose clothing, scarves, and unsecured fabric away from rotating rollers, conveyors, and exposed pinch point machinery. Wear fitted work clothing and secure anything that can hang or contact moving equipment during production operation. At the rolling mill cooling bed, movement near the steel transfer rails suddenly shifts toward the active machine gap. Stay completely off cooling bed rails and transfer gaps while the system remains energized or moving. Use lockout procedures, guarded walkways, and restricted access zones before entering any area around active transfer mechanisms. Cooling beds use synchronized walking beams and transfer mechanisms that create shifting openings between rails. A small loss of stable footing can rapidly redirect movement toward active mechanical pathways with very limited recovery time. Active transfer systems create constantly changing openings across production lines. Lockout procedures and controlled access help reduce exposure near moving transfer mechanisms. The wooden bar barely touched the metal door before attention shifted away, and the unstable setup suddenly redirected its stored position across the work area. Long wooden bars and loose materials must never be left balancing unattended against doors, movable surfaces, or temporary supports. Even brief loss of attention can allow unstable materials to fall or rebound unexpectedly. The heavy pallet looked controlled during unloading, then handling stability was lost near the lift gate edge. Heavy cargo unloading requires controlled handling, centered weight positioning, and secured movement paths on lift gates. Uncontrolled rolling loads can quickly overpower manual handling. As handling control was lost during unloading, the pallet's movement increased beyond the available restraint and positioning control. Once the center of gravity moved beyond the supported area, load, stability was lost. Heavy loads can quickly lose stability when control and support are reduced on elevated platforms. Keep cargo restrained, control movement paths, and maintain safe positioning around liftgate edges. The welding arc flashed across the metal frame, and an unexpected electrical path suddenly traveled through the workpiece. Verify grounding, insulation, and dry contact surfaces before striking an arc on conductive metal frames. Damaged leads, unstable grounding, moisture, or unintended contact points can redirect welding current through surrounding metal structures. The scaffold suddenly shifted beside the building facade, and multiple platform sections rapidly lost support stability. Verify scaffold bracing, ties, and support connections before loading multi-level work platforms. Scaffold systems depend on balanced load transfer between planks, frames, braces, anchors, and ground support. When one structural connection fails or becomes overloaded, the surrounding sections can rapidly cascade into progressive collapse. The scaffold structure lost stability as load forces exceeded the support system's ability to redistribute weight. Once key supports displaced, gravity and lateral forces caused connected sections to collapse through adjacent bays. Inspect scaffold ties, load distribution, bracing, and platform conditions before every shift and after weather exposure. Keep ground-level access paths clear and maintain exclusion areas beneath elevated scaffold systems. In a workyard, a crane boom is handled without full support, then stored force rapidly redirects the boom through the work area. Crane booms must be supported, depressurized, and secured before any adjustment or repair begins. Lower the boom, release hydraulic pressure, secure pins and supports, and keep hands clear before moving or repairing any boom component. On a loose rubble mound, the excavator reached into the standing structure, then collapsing material rapidly redirected force through the boom and shifted the machine off stable positioning. Keep demolition equipment on firm ground before reaching into standing structures and maintain safe setback distance to prevent collapse pull-in hazards. When the structure collapsed around the boom transferred force back toward the excavator through leverage. Loose rubble beneath the tracks provided limited resistance against the shifting load. Demolition stability starts with the ground beneath the machine. Without a solid base, collapse forces can rapidly reduce equipment stability during demolition work. During an active house fire response, an access ladder is positioned against a garage roof, while water and debris spread across the ground below. Then the ladder base suddenly shifts across the wet surface. Ladders used during emergency or elevated operations must always be placed on firm, secure ground and stabilized before climbing begins. Wet surfaces, debris, and unstable footing can quickly compromise ladder stability under load. Near a building, a cherry picker remains positioned near ongoing operations. When ignition suddenly develops near the lower section and heat rapidly spreads upward through the machine structure, aerial lift equipment must be kept away from heat sources, sparks, fuel leaks, and combustible buildup. Hydraulic fluids, electrical systems, and accumulated debris can allow fire to spread quickly once ignition occurs. Cherry pickers contain hydraulic lines, fuel components, wiring, and enclosed spaces that can channel heat upward through the structure. Once ignition begins near the base, rising heat, pressurized fluids, and airflow around the boom can accelerate flame spread throughout the equipment in seconds. Small ignition sources can quickly overtake large equipment, control combustible buildup before heat finds a path. At the busy container terminal, the suspended spreader pauses above the active transport lanes and remains positioned over the work zone. Keep all workers and vehicles completely clear of suspended crane equipment during lifting, transfer, or positioning operations. Use exclusion zones, controlled traffic routes, and active lift coordination to prevent movement beneath hanging loads or stalled crane systems. At a piling site, the drilling rig enters wet ground. Then pressurized soil slurry rapidly rises around the rotating auger. Piling work requires controlled spoil discharge, ground pressure monitoring, and a cleared rig area before drilling continues. Set barriers, manage slurry flow, watch ground conditions, and keep the drilling area clear during auger operation. Don't forget to share what you learned today in the comments. Your insight could save a life. Take care. At a demolition zone, a high-reach excavator pushes against the upper section of a structure. Then the machine's center of balance suddenly shifts beyond its stable operating range. Heavy equipment must always operate within its designed stability range during demolition work. Applying force too far from the machine's support base can quickly shift the balance beyond recovery limits. Inside a fast-paced loading yard, a forklift moves stacked crates into position. Then the raised load suddenly shifts beyond its stable balance point. Forklift loads should remain low, evenly balanced, and properly secured during transport and positioning. Raising or tilting unstable loads while moving can quickly shift weight beyond the forklift's control range. A forklift stays balanced by keeping the combined center of gravity between the machine and its load inside the stability triangle formed by the wheels. As the load lifts higher or tilts forward, the balance point shifts outward, reducing stability and increasing the chance of sudden tipping or load displacement. The higher the load rises, the faster stability disappears. Keep the weight low before gravity takes control. The massive steel rose smoothly into place. Then the shifting load transfer rapidly exceeded the crane's available stability margin. Heavy structural lifts require precise load calculations, balanced rigging geometry, controlled lift angles, and verified crane stability before suspended steel sections are raised. Oversized loads can overpower crane balance when weight transfer shifts unexpectedly. The truck reversed toward the concrete blocks for loading. Then rear contact shifted the stack beyond its stable support position. Truck loading operations require controlled reversing paths, stable material stacking, and restricted access behind loads. Vehicle contact can destabilize stacked concrete blocks and create collapse hazards. As the truck reversed into position, rear contact transferred force into the stacked concrete blocks. The impact shifted the stack beyond its balance point, reducing stability throughout the stored material. Heavy stacked materials can rapidly lose stability when external force is introduced. Maintain exclusion zones, control reversing movement, and verify stack stability before maneuvering trucks into loading positions. The cylindrical load suddenly broke free beside the trailer, and rolling force rapidly traveled through the narrow loading path. Do not rely on wedges or chocks alone to restrain cylindrical cargo during transport or unloading operations. Round loads like pipes, coils, and tanks naturally store rolling energy. If support blocks shift, lose friction, or fail under load transfer, the cargo can rapidly accelerate along the release path. Along the side of a building, a pressurized line is opened before the system is fully isolated. Then fluid suddenly releases outward under remaining system pressure. Before opening any pipe or service line, confirm the system has been fully depressurized and all valves or control points are secured. Uncontrolled release paths can quickly turn routine maintenance into a high-force discharge hazard. A crane lifts the fully loaded pallet beside a building. Then the suspended load suddenly shifts and movement spreads through the overhead rigging system. Keep unstable or unevenly secured loads away from occupied buildings, access routes, and active traffic areas during lifting operations. Verify pallet condition, load balance, and rigging stability before every lift, and maintain clear exclusion zones beneath suspended materials. Improper load balance, weak pallet integrity, or shifting center of gravity can place uneven stress on lifting slings during elevation. Once the load moves outside stable positioning, gravity rapidly increases swing and directional movement through the rigging system. Suspended loads depend completely on stable rigging and balanced support. Check every securing point and keep occupied areas clear before lifting begins. At a busy industrial worksite, a crane hoists a massive water tank overhead. Then the suspended load suddenly moves outside its planned lift alignment. Crane lifts must maintain controlled load balance using proper rigging methods, tag lines, and stable lift planning. Any uncontrolled swing or shifting movement can rapidly destabilize the suspended load path. Suspended loads behave like pendulums once movement begins. Wind, uneven rigging tension, or sudden directional changes can transfer momentum into the load, causing it to swing outward while gravity continuously pulls from below. As the motion increases, maintaining alignment becomes increasingly difficult. A suspended load keeps moving once momentum takes over. Control the swing before the load controls the lift. At a busy loading yard, a truck-mounted crane guides large sheet panels toward a trailer bed. Then the suspended material suddenly shifts outside the planned lift path and moves downward rapidly. Loads suspended by cranes must always be treated as unstable moving hazards. Landing zones should remain completely clear, while tag lines and controlled positioning methods are used from a safe distance to manage movement without entering the drop path. At a wet roadside, a tractor trailer turns beside the walking path, and the blind corner rapidly narrows the available clearance during the sweep. Heavy trucks should only turn when the full walking path is clear and visible. Use mirrors, cameras, spotters, low speed, and extra clearance before moving near sidewalks, crossings, or tight entrances. Long trucks off track during turns, causing the trailer to follow a tighter path than the cab. Wet roads and limited visibility reduce the available adjustment space during the maneuver. Clear the walking path before the truck moves. No full view, no turn. Across a dusty industrial workyard, maintenance activity continues around an exposed electrical cabinet. Then a sudden electrical flash releases from inside the energized equipment. Electrical systems must always be isolated and secured before access begins. Open energized equipment creates an invisible hazard area where uncontrolled energy can release instantly if proper lockout and clearance controls are missing. On a crowded construction site, work continues beside an excavator when the bucket suddenly drops into the active movement path during operation. Do not work beneath or beside an active excavator attachment without a fully controlled exclusion area, constant operator visibility, and clear separation between ground crews and moving equipment. Excavator buckets carry massive hydraulic force and continue moving through wide swing arcs with limited stopping distance when elevated work positions enter the attachment's rotation path. Even small machine movements can rapidly reduce safe clearance around the active equipment. Heavy equipment needs a protected movement perimeter at all times. Separate people from swing paths before any bucket movement begins. The rotating drilling equipment remains still for a moment, then suddenly returns to active motion across the operating area. Fully isolate, lock out, and verify all rotating equipment has stopped before placing hands, tools, or materials near moving drilling machinery or exposed drive components. A truck tire holds pressure during inflation, then the compressed wheel assembly suddenly separates and redirects force across the service area. Use inflation cages, remote air lines, and controlled pressure procedures to reduce exposure to sudden pressure release and moving wheel components during tire servicing. Heavy vehicle tires store large amounts of compressed air energy inside the casing and wheel assembly. If a rim component, bead, or tire structure fails, the rapid pressure release can generate powerful air movement and project wheel components outward. Compressed air failures can release powerful force within fractions of a second. Use proper inflation controls and maintain safe clearance around the wheel assembly during tire servicing. An overhead crane attempted to move a massive steel load across the fabrication floor when the lift setup exceeded its verified lifting capacity. Crane operations must stay within verified load limits for the crane, lifting magnets, and support equipment before movement. Load weight, center of gravity, and rigging capacity should be confirmed during pre-lift checks. At a street excavation, an uncontrolled car entered the active work area. Protect roadway work with barriers, traffic separation, spotters, and clear vehicle control planning before excavation begins. Cones alone do not stop vehicle intrusion. Any excavation beside live traffic needs physical protection, safe routing, warning signs, and a controlled buffer between traffic and the work path. Don't forget to share what you learned today in the comments. Your insight could save a life. Take care.